All right, good evening, Inner Circle. Inner Circle Unite. We are the first Wednesday in July. It's half the year has gone. We're in the seventh month of the year. Holy smokes. The last few months have not been what we thought they were going to be. We thought when we started the year, we thought there's going to be no one in sight for the real estate market, and that's turned out to be correct. But holy smokes, the country's going to hell in a handbasket, and we have been staying on top of it every Wednesday. We've been meeting here religiously, looking at our local numbers, talking with local realtors and title companies and investors, and trying to get a handle of what's going on. And to everyone's astonishment, mine mainly, most included, real estate market's just on fire. We're down 30% in inventory. We're down 20% in the amount of sales too, but it's because we're down 30% in inventory. And depending upon which loan shop you talk to, the buyer demand is up between 10 and 30% with um, new loan applications versus this time last year. And it's craziness out there. I actually, some of you guys know this. I have my real estate license, and I don't do much with it, just for my own personal enjoyment for comps and stuff like that. Friends and family, I'll help them buy and sell houses, but handful of transactions a year. I don't really use it as a traditional realtor very often. Um, However, the market says sell, and so I'm helping people sell their houses because, my gosh, I mean, check this out. I just listed my brother's house on Monday. He's a Army recruiter, and he's been here for 4 years. I helped him buy a house. I can see his house from my window right here. He's across the lake. We live in the same subdivision, and it's been an awesome experience living next to my brother for the last 4 years. However, he just got orders last week or 2 weeks ago to move to Ohio. And so he's frantic. He's never sold a house before. This is the first house he's ever bought. He's always lived on base, from Germany to all the other places that he lived around the world. And he's never owned a home before. So he's freaking out. Nick, how do I do this? I'm like, relax, man. You're in a good spot because this is the best time to sell since I've been in the business for 20 years. Like, hands down, it is the best time to sell. Turns out a whole bunch of people got word that he was going to be moving, and he got an offer before we even met, basically, to list the house. Um, and we put all together, and he's going to make a whack on it. He's really, really excited, nervous, like, does this really work? I'm like, yeah, man, we do this all the time. You're going to be fine. You're going to have to get through some inspections and stuff like that, but you've got an awesome house, and they wanted to buy it, and you want to sell it to them, so let's make it happen. The photographer took all the photos, posted it on Facebook, and I had realtors chasing me down today saying, hey, can you tell me about this house? I'm like, man, it's already sold. I mean, we never put it on the MLS or nothing. And one of those people, it's a long story. I won't even get into that, but it's unbelievable the amount of demand for houses right now. Um, so sell, help. If you have, we harped on this last Wednesday, guys. If you have your real estate license, you should be pounding your sphere of influence and helping people buy and sell houses. I know that's not why we're here, because we're here to invest in real estate and things like that. But come on, we're here to look for opportunities, and there's a huge opportunity to help people, right? And put some dollars in our pocket. So if you don't have your real estate license, you should strongly consider getting that. And I know, since we harped on this last Wednesday, I know a lot of you guys are like, yeah, Nick, we really should be doing this. You're right. We're here to invest, but why not? There's opportunities out there to put some dollars in our pocket by helping people out. So I just kind of wanted to recap on that because, man, the market is hot. The market says sell, and the inventory is down 30%. Here's the challenge, though. Foreclosures dropped off completely the middle of March when the shutdown happened. So we estimate there's somewhere between 3,500 and 5,000 foreclosures that would have happened had the shutdown not happened. It had nothing to do with the economy or anything like that, just the normal rate of foreclosures happening, which, depending upon how you're looking at it, is adding or subtracting to the problem of inventory. There's probably, half of those don't get bought on the courthouse steps, and they end up getting listed with a realtor and try to get sold. They're non-existent. They have stopped, put a moratorium on all foreclosures. So inventory is stupid low. We don't know when the foreclosures open back up if they're going to put all 5,000 back out there or if they're going to do them in stages. We don't know how that's going to work at all. But we're going to have an inventory shortage for a long time. And with the buyers' applications up 10 to 30%, it's just like the market is for the seller better than I've ever seen it in my entire career. So, yeah, guys, we need to be looking for opportunities to help people, put some dollars in our pocket, and we need to be still looking for our flips. We need to still be looking for our rentals. We need to still be looking for houses to potentially wholesale off to other investors. And we still need to be having conversations with people like our lenders, title companies, everybody who's in the business to find out what the word is on the street so that we can stay on top of this thing and be in the right position so that when things break loose and there's the mess is there, we're gonna be there in a striking position to be able to clean it up and clean up and put in our pocketbooks to help people out. So with that, we're going to deviate, well, a lot from what we our normal programming, what we talk about on our Wednesday webinars. We rarely have a guest for our inner circle meeting. And I know a few of you said that you wouldn't be able to make it tonight, so we are obviously going to record this for your viewing pleasure in the future. But I'd like to welcome a good friend of mine, Scott Jelenick, to the call. How you doing, Scott?
I'm fantastic, fantastic. Glad to be here.
Well, we're honored to have you. We rarely have any guests for these calls. This is normal St. Louis stuff that we talk about and work through potential properties that people are looking at, issues, challenges, concerns, whatever people have, and try to run series and help people, find deals, get them funded, run a rental portfolio, do wholesaling, and do rehabs. And it's nice to share with our folks a strategy that we've been talking about privately, but don't really have any formal training on it. And I know you're about the nation's leading expert on these slow flips. So why don't you give a little background on yourself and
I'm going to
take it from there.
Yep, I actually put that into the slides I'm going to go over with you. And the reason I did it is because I need you to understand why I think the way I think, because a couple of things I want to tell you guys before we get started is some of you listening are going to absolutely hate what I'm going to talk about. Some of you listening, seriously, some people listening are going to be like, there is no way I would do that. Slumlord, I hate that, and that's okay. The second thing is, some of you are going to think, and Nick, I've never actually been to your event. Some of you are going to think, this is the opposite of what I've been trained. This is the opposite of what I've been taught. And that's okay. And I'm not saying anybody's wrong. And the reason I say that is I've been to other events, friends of mine events, and I hear them teaching. And in my head, I'm going, my God, that's the opposite of what I teach. It doesn't mean what they're teaching is wrong and what I'm teaching is right. We all teach what we use as our strategies. And so I may very well say something today that you're going to be thinking in your head, Nick said specifically, don't do that. And not to say that he's wrong with that. This is a different strategy. So I'm going to explain to you my thought process, how I got into this thought process, and then what I'm doing now. And some of you will absolutely love it, and it literally changes the whole focus of your future moving forward. I have people that see this and literally are like, I'm not doing anything else but this ever again. And they are. I mean, they're crushing it. I have people that are doing 15 of them in a year. Doesn't sound like a lot when you're talking about your full business, but when you see the way it compounds, it's massive. And so I just wanted to lay that out because some of you might be shaking your head in a couple minutes. I can't see any of you, and might be thinking, oh my God, I absolutely hate this. More often than not, it's the opposite. All right, so bear with me. I'm not a tech guy, so I'm going to try and figure out how to do this screen share, and I should be able to get you done. Oops, that didn't work. Hang on one second. Screen. All right, just give me a second. What do you see now? Anything? Nope. All right, let me figure this out.
Nothing yet.
All right, all right. Told you I'm not a tech guy, right?
You did.
All right.
And that's okay. We're used to technical glitches here, so you're in good company.
So I see where I get it on. I'm just trying to figure out how to share it.
There should be a button next to mic, camera, and screen.
No, I got that, but then when I share it, it's just my
There you go.
screen.
I got you now.
Now what do you see?
I see Mr. Burns.
You see Mr.
There you
Burns.
go.
All right. Got you guys.
Yep.
All right. I'll cut back to Mr. Burns in a minute to let you know why he's there. But first, I'm going to take you down a little road just to give you a little bit of history on myself and how I've evolved to doing what it is that I'm doing today. And I need to do this first because when I don't do this, people naturally default to, why would you ever pay off a house? Why would you do it this way? All these negative things. And so I need to explain to you why I do the things the way I do. So first and foremost, those of you who can't tell by my rate of speech or what little I have left of my accent, I'm originally from New York. I grew up on Long Island, and I went to high school on Long Island. Back in 11th grade, I never really paid much attention in school. In 11th grade, and mostly what I did was I sold candy in school. I always had a backpack filled with candy, and that's what I did all class. The end of class in 11th grade, a Spanish teacher pulled me over, and she says, "Scott, why do you even come in?" And I remember thinking, well, this is what I do for a living. You know, I come in to sell my candy. And I went home and I thought about it. I already had a job after school, and that was actually my very last day of school. I've never been back to school since then. So, not to say I don't have education, but I have no more formal education. I've never been back to school since the 11th grade. I started working in a mall on Long Island called Sunrise Mall. I worked at a place called Sunrise Cheese and Deli, and I sold sandwiches and made people their lunches and all. Well, then they had an Army recruiting event came through, and every day, it was a whole week long, every day they were coming in, I'm making them their lunches, joking with them. And the soldiers were joking with me, and they're like, "Hey, what about you? Why don't you join?" And I kind of laughingly responded, and I said, "Oh, sorry, I'd love to, but I'm only 17 years old," which they responded, "You only have to be 17 with your parents' permission." So next thing I know, I was in the Army. I was in for a short time. And then when I got back out, I was back on Long Island, no education, no special skills. I was in communications then. I had nothing really to convey to the real world. And so I started selling sodas on the beach. Really only people from Long Island would appreciate this because Long Island, Jones Beach is a different animal than all other beaches. When you park, you walk like you're going through the Sahara before you get to the ocean. So I would walk around with a cooler all day, $2 a can, sell sodas. And it was a great business. Well, right about this time, my mother was a nurse on Long Island, and a friend of hers had moved to Virginia Beach, came down and was telling her, "You got to check it out. It's just like Long Island, only so much cheaper." So my mother decided she wanted to come down. At first, I wasn't going to come, and then I decided, I'm in the business of selling sodas on the beach. What better business move than to move to a place with beach in its name? So 1992, I moved down to Virginia Beach. It didn't take 10 minutes in Virginia Beach to realize there's no business here selling sodas on the beach. And because the beach is about as wide as a room, there's hotels, vending machines, cops, restaurants. So clearly I wasn't doing the soda selling on the beach business anymore. So I got into a business that to this very day, 28 years later, I still tell people when they complain they have no money, can't find a job, don't know what they're going to do. I still tell people the same thing I did back then, which was I started mowing lawns. And I didn't have a real business. I had a 85 Mercury Cougar. I kept the lawnmower in my trunk. I would drive around, look for high grass, knock on the door, mow the lawn, 25 bucks. So to this day, I tell people anybody can make $100, $200 a day. If you need money, you get a lawnmower. People with high grass have high grass for a reason because they don't want to cut it. They're happy to pay somebody to do it. So at this point, I'm living in a townhouse with my sister. We rented for $675 a month. My brother and my mother lived in another townhouse my mother was renting at the time. My brother lived with them, and he got this flyer on his door. And the part that really attracted me, and I can't see you guys, so I don't know how old you are, but if you're older, you may remember there was a thing back then called non-qualifying assumptions. This was in 1994 now. And they did away with them in 1987 for FHA and 1989 for VA, but what it meant was anybody can take over the person's mortgage, almost like sub 2 now, but with the blessing of the mortgage company. And so I called this agent. She explained to me it was $5,000 down and $675 a month. I was currently paying $675 where I was renting, and I had $5,000. So I had no interest in real estate at all, but I was under the impression that it was better to own than to rent. So I figured, hey, I can buy this. I had no credit. I had no job, but I qualified. So I purchased this house, $5,000 down, $675 a month. Total price was $66,000, and I moved into it. Now I started mowing lawns right around this neighborhood. This was Rosemont Forest area. I started mowing them for $10, but they were tiny lawns, and I was able to walk from house to house. Well, about 2 weeks after I moved into this property, another house came up for sale on the block, had a white sign out front, handwritten, and it said $2,000 down, take over payments. Well, without knowing anything, and I know how stupid this sounds now, but without knowing anything about value or equity or real estate in general, I felt like I got ripped off. I paid 5,000 down. This one was 2,000 down. And I know in hindsight this sounds really stupid, but I was a child myself and I didn't know. And so I was angry at first, but I already closed on mine. I was already living in it. And then I had this genius idea that why don't I buy that one also? And that'll cost average me out to $3,500 each. So I scrounged up the money, purchased the second house on the block. And mind you, this is 1994. These same houses that were 65,000, now they're about 189. So I purchased the second one on the block, and that was my first time having an inkling, a thought of real estate. I was like, I kept drilling into my brain, I borrowed the money, they're paying it off. I borrowed the money, the tenant's paying for it. And I kind of got excited about it. It started, marinating in my brain, and I couldn't get it out. And that's when I came up with what I always called my McDonald's plan. And it has nothing to do with McDonald's, and I never worked at McDonald's, but I used to always joke and tell my friends, I'm going to buy $1 million worth of these properties, and I can go work at McDonald's if I want for 30 years, and I'll be a millionaire. And I know, again, in hindsight, that sounds really stupid, but I was a child, and this made a lot of sense. And so I started doing just that. I became obsessed with calling on every for sale sign, agents, by owners, back then it was the newspapers every Saturday. We'd circle the ads, run around town. I got some as low as $500 down, 5,000 was about the max, 2,000 down. And I would put people in these properties for about $675 a month, and my mortgage payment was about $675, which, as you guys know now, is not a good business plan. But I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew I wanted to accumulate real estate. And so that is exactly what I set out to do. Well, then 2001 came, and in 2001, I don't know if you guys were in real estate back then or remember real estate or paid any attention to the market, but something interesting happened in 2001. And I remember it was Easter, and I was on my way to my mother's house, and I saw a new for sale sign up. And so I was like, ooh, let me call, so I call on my way over, and the lady tells me it's $90,000. And I'm like, okay, thank you very much. And I'm leaving going, she's out of her mind, $90,000. These are $70,000 houses at best. Well, if you remember 2001, that's what started our trajectory to mayhem, right? So now next thing you know, I'd call on another one 2-3 months later, and they're like 95,000, 105,000, 115,000. It was mind-blowing to me. So I did what everybody taught to do, which to this day, they still teach the same thing. And again, I told you, I don't know what you're taught now, because some people love this plan and some people hate it. People still teach this. I did what everyone taught me to do, which was pull out the equity. I had about 20 houses at the time. Pull out the equity and use it to buy more houses. And so I did. So I had these townhouses now I owed about 60,000 on, and they were now worth 120, 130, 140. And so I pulled out all the equity and I used it to buy more houses. And so 2002, 2003, 2004, I continued this, and I got up to 84 houses. And I'm on top of the world. And I always say, by the world's standard, I'm hugely successful. I was also wholesaling, I was rehabbing, so I was making a bunch of money during the boom. And one of the big mistakes a lot of people made during the boom, and probably myself included, is that we all thought we were smarter than we were. And the reason is because everything you touched turned to gold. Every house you bought was going up in value. If you took too long to rehab a house, it was worth more than you planned on selling it for, so you got bonus. Everything you touched turned to gold. So I got up to 84 houses. I had 84 mortgages, and I was collecting probably about $90,000 a month in rents, and I probably had about $80,000 a month in mortgages. And I was still doing, I didn't need the money from the rentals. It was all part of my long-term plan. And I was doing great with my other businesses until 2007. I'm sure you guys remember it. So in 2007, when people say it happened overnight, they're not giving you fair justice. If you weren't involved in real estate back then, it happened overnight in a flash. Everybody's like, oh, we saw it coming. No, you didn't, or you wouldn't have been in it. It happened overnight with the snap of a fingers. There was deals we were in the middle of pending closing, and the mortgage companies were going out of business while we were waiting on it getting funded. There was deals we signed on already, and we're just waiting on the wire, and the mortgage company would disappear, go out of business. And it was happening over and over again. We got annihilated. I had 84 properties at this point. About 30% overnight, not in 3 weeks or months or 6 months later, overnight stopped paying. they couldn't, because yes, real estate got collapsed, but it affected, if you remember, everything, every industry. The recession, it affected everything. And so I had all these mortgages now, all these tenants that stopped paying, and I had to pay the mortgage. Well, it was okay. I was doing really well, and I had a lot of money. I had almost $1 million in cash. And so I figured, well, I'll weather the storm, and then, life will go back to normal. Up until that time, in the whole history of our country, nothing ever happened like this with houses. We had slowdowns, we had recessions, we had flat markets where you might go 10 years and not have a price increase, but we never had houses that went from $200,000 to $30,000. That was unprecedented. Well, I rode the storm, and I was losing probably $30,000 or $40,000 a month. But I'm the guy who stops foreclosures. I had the money, and I was like, okay, well, let me keep feeding the beast, fight the good fight, and I did until my money ran out. And I don't really particularly ever even like talking about this, but when the money ran out, you guys can imagine what happened. I was the one in foreclosure. I'm the guy who stops foreclosures. I had almost $1 million in cash. I have 84 properties, and it became Armageddon. And when the money ran out, I had houses in foreclosure, and I lost almost 55. I did lose 55 houses to foreclosure. And I was able to save some, and I literally had to draw them out on paper, list each and every one, and then circle which ones am I going to try and save and which ones am I going to have to let go. And that was rough to do, and I did. And so I lost about 55 houses to foreclosure, lost all my money, and I am blessed for several reasons. But one of the things I'm very blessed with is the fact that I have no other skills. And the reason I look at that as a blessing is because most of my colleagues at the time went back to their jobs. They said, oh, real estate's over, and they went back to doing whatever they had their degrees in, whatever their profession was before they got into real estate. I had no choice but to figure it out because I was living a hell of a lifestyle, and I was like, well, if I have to get a job, it'd have to be like a surgeon or something, and who's going to pay me this kind of money? I've never been back to school since 11th grade, so it got down to where I have to figure real estate out. Well, some of the things I figured out after the bust is older guys, and I have mentors myself. You guys have mentors. You're working with Nick. I have people myself that I work with, and I had guys that I worked with all along, and older guys didn't get hurt. And so I started trying to decipher, well, what was the difference with what they're doing and what we're doing? How come now they are not celebrating, but they're profiting off this bust? They're out there buying more houses now. What are we doing different? And so I deep dove into it. And one of the stories I always joke around and tell, and I'm going to tell you guys is, I used to borrow money, and I had a lot of money, and I'm driving. I used to have a Cadillac XLR convertible. They only made it for a couple of years, so I don't know if you even know what it is. It was a $105,000 car. It was beautiful. I absolutely loved it. And I'm driving to pick up checks from my hard money lenders. These are the older guys I'm talking about, and they'll meet me in a Honda Accord. They're the ones with tens of millions of dollars loaning me the money, and they're pulling up in a Honda Accord, and I'm pulling up in my $105,000 car. Well, in hindsight, things like that were just blaring obvious. And the houses. So they all had houses. I had houses. But theirs, what did they all have in common? Everything we're taught not to do. They all have them free and clear. And during the boom, I would argue, and I was wrong always. I didn't know that at the time. I would argue with them, you can make so much more money if you would do this, pull this money out, and you can do that. I'm telling them how they can make so much more money, right? And everybody, they say the same things I say to people now. Well, you go make that money. You go make the money. Don't worry about me. And so I realized this after the fact, what was different. And I completely changed my mindset at that point to everything I was taught was leverage. And leverage is sexy, and that's why they teach it. You can go buy $10 million of property this year, just have good credit and sign your name and have a down payment, and everything is great until it's not. And so I've changed my whole model, and we're going to get into my real estate perspective in a minute as to what exactly has changed and why I believe the way I believe now. So fast forward, I've been doing real estate full time now over 20 years. I've done over 700 deals right here in my local market. And for some people, that's a ton of deals. And for some people, I have friends that do 7,000 deals. And they're like, "Can you tell people only 700? I'm like, hey, it is what it is. I do bigger deals, mind you, but 700, I'm probably closing in on 800 now. But in my career, I currently own 115 properties that I'm holding. And these are different now than what I used to do. And we're going to get into that in a minute. That's what we're going to talk about today. Out of that 115, 49 of them are paid off now. The balance of them will be paid off at some term within the next 5 years. And that's really exciting. This is the stuff that I'm real excited about. And I'm going to share all that with you in a little while. I average about 40 deals a year now. And again, I know some people are like 40 deals a year. I do 40 deals a month. That's fantastic. I do a specific type of deal and I do it for a specific reason why I only do the way I do. 12 is the number that I am most proud of, and 12 is the reason I design my business the way I design my business. 12 is the number of weeks I spend traveling with my family every year. So when I redesigned this business after the fallout, after I started recovering from the bust, what I tried to do was opposite of what everyone teaches you to do, was I tried to design what I wanted my days, my weeks, my months, my life to look like, and then design the business that will fit into the cracks, the business I can do and still have that, instead of what we all do. And I don't know you guys and I don't know if you're doing it, but what we all typically do is we work our butts off and we try and squeeze our life in to whatever time may in fact be left. And what you'll find when you do that is oftentimes there's just no time left. It's the same way with money. If you don't find a path for your money will find a path that follows the path of least resistance, and your time will be the same thing. If you don't have it allocated to where you want it to be, you will often find that there's just none left. And so I tried to do the opposite, where I said, this is what I want my life to look like. Now, what kind of business can I fit into the time left over that can support that life? All right, so that's enough on me. I just needed to share that with you so that you can understand why I do things the way I do things now, because it's the opposite of what everybody's been taught. So I do training basically the same exact way that Nick does, and I'll tell you why I got started. After the bust, I was offended that the big boxes that fly in and out of town were teaching the same stuff they taught beforehand. It pissed me off. I'm like, I can't believe they're still telling people to borrow all this money, and it aggravated me. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna start my own and tell people there's another way. And that's kind of what I got into this for. And so that's what I'm gonna share with you guys tonight. I hope I'm not speaking too fast for you. It's interesting when we're on the computer, I can't see anyone's faces, so I have no idea if you're lost, if you're sleeping, if you're laughing. I have no way of knowing. So hopefully I'm not talking too fast for you. So first I want to tell you what I consider to be the great rental myth. And this is what is taught everywhere. Every big box you go to, every seminar, every book you read, they all teach the exact same thing. And I've come to the conclusion that this was probably originally perpetrated by the banks, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So what I consider to be the great rental myth is what everyone teaches is you buy a house, you buy a property, you put down X amount of money down, and then you make $300 a month, $200 a month, $400 a month. And then you get 10 of them and it's $3,000 a month or whatever the numbers may came out to be. What I have found, and this is not me speaking, this is national statistic, the average rental costs an average of $300 per month in upkeep. Now, people, including myself, say, you're out of your mind. It doesn't cost any. I haven't done a repair in a year. I haven't done a repair in 2 years. So maybe I spent $300 the whole year last year. And you're right. But this is over the long term. But then you have a turnover that might be 3 years later and you have to recarpet, you have to repaint. Maybe the air conditioning unit got stolen or whatever it may be. And you end up spending $4 or $5 grand to do the turnover. In the end, it averages out to your $300 a month. So all the people who are taught the plan of make $200 a month, make $300 a month, they're fighting a losing battle. They're making money, yes, right now for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be. And then they have this big turnover or this big repair that needs to be done, and they have to feed it all back. It becomes a losing game that they chase forever, for 30 years. And I have to stress when I say 30 years is a long time. I used to think when I was a kid, when I started this, I was like, oh, it's only 30 years. I'll go work at McDonald's for 30 years and I'll be a millionaire. Well, I'm not that young anymore. 30 years is a long time. And so I'm not playing that game. The other thing that everybody is taught to do, and I'm going to give you the exact example they all teach, is the leverage equation, where they say if you have $100,000 in cash, you can buy one property for $100,000 cash, or you can buy 10 properties with $10,000 down each, right? I'm sure you guys have seen this already. And then they're like, if the market goes up 10%, with the cash property, you made a 10% return. With the leverage model, you made a 100% return because you made 10,000 on each of them, right? And that's the sexy part. You're like, damn, that's what I want to do. That's awesome. What they don't talk about is if the market went down 10%. And I get why they don't, because first of all, it's not sexy. And second off, it was kind of unprecedented till 2007. But if the market goes down 10%, with the cash model, you still have $90,000. With the leverage model, you now have zero. Furthermore, what they don't talk about, again, because it's not sexy and very, it doesn't happen often, but it happened, is if the market went down 30% or 40%. Well, let's just say 30 because it makes math easy. If it went down 30% with your cash model, you still have $70,000. With the leverage model, now you still owe $900,000, but you only have $700,000 worth of value. You're negative $200,000. And you still have these mortgages you have to pay. And so this actually happened. I had one house that I flipped. I'm going to tell you a specific story, and I wish you guys can stop me when I get on rants, because I'll keep you guys till midnight. I have a house that I bought. I'm going to tell you the real numbers. I bought it for $120,000. At the time, it appraised at $199,000, and so the mortgage company gave me $150,000. So they gave me an extra $30,000 because back then you can get an 80% mortgage on anything. So they gave me. I think somebody's got to put themselves on mute.
Yeah, whoever just joined, if you could put yourself on mute.
So the bank gave me $150,000. The day I bought it, I left with $30,000. I put it on the market and I sold it for $199,000. About 2 years later, that house got foreclosed on, and I bought it again for $30,000. I still own it today. The same house. I bought it. It was appraised at $199,000. I bought it for $120,000, borrowed $150,000, sold it at $199,000, and now I bought that house again for $30,000. And that's kind of stuff like that just stuck out in my head to where I said, I've got to change my model. So who makes all the money in the world? And in any city, including your own, any big city you go to, you can stand there with all the big buildings and look up, and who has all the money? The banks. All the big buildings have a bank logo on the side of them, and that's not an accident. So with this great rental myth model that I'm telling you about, what do? You have to run around and find a tenant. You run around and do the maintenance. You run around and and have a job if you have to when it's vacant. So that what can you do with the money? Send the money off to the bank. The bank don't care if the air conditioning unit got stolen. The bank don't care if your tenant got laid off. The bank don't care about any of that. The bank's like, just send me my check, right? And it works for the bank. It's not too bad. So that's the bank's position. And so what I try and utilize to help get this vision clear in people's head, and that's why you saw Mr. Burns before. I have a vision in my head of Mr. Burns being at the top of the bank building with his hands just like you're seeing, laughing at us, run along and get my money, run along and get my money. And that's what we do as conventional. We are serving Mr. Burns. We are running around to fill the property. We're running around to repair. We're running around to meet the Section 8 inspector. We're running around doing all this work so we can get the check. And the bulk of the check, if not all of it, we mail up to Mr. Burns. And he sits at the top of the building, and we continue mailing him the money. So that's the vision I have in my head. And the model that I have changed to flips everything on its head, and we become Mr. Burns. So that's kind of the groundwork I wanted to lay out for you, to let you know what it is exactly that I do. In this groundwork, we become Mr. Burns. We no longer do any of that. Everyone else is running around, scurrying around and trying to take care of their stuff so they can send us the check, which is it's a whole different ballgame. So I'm going to explain to you what a slow flip is. There's two different ways of doing slow flips, and I'm going to explain to you the way that I do it. A slow flip is the process of flipping a property as slowly as possible for the fastest possible path to wealth. Now, I know that almost sounds counterintuitive when you hear slowly as possible for fastest path to wealth. If you read it, it's not the fastest path to cash. That would be wholesaling. It's not the fastest path to cash. It's the fastest path to wealth, there's a big difference. And I'm sure you guys have gone over the differences on, making money and being wealthy are two very different things. There's two different ways to do it. One is to buy a property, rehab the property, and then sell it with long-term owner financing or a lease option. I do land contracts, long-term owner financing. I know some people like to do it with lease options. I don't do it that way because of a court case I lost, and the judge told me benefits and burdens had to convey together. You can't keep all the benefits and give them all the burdens. And so after that court case, I changed mine to a contract for deed, which is what I still use to this day. And the second way of doing them, which is the way I do it, an as-is sale. followed by a long-term owner financing. So meaning I'm selling a property exactly as is. I'm not painting it. I'm not cleaning up the garbage on the floor. I'm not mowing the lawn. Exactly the way I get it is exactly the way I sell it. And I sell it with long-term owner financing. So the formula that we use here, and I want to stress that every area is going to be different. However, from what I know of your area, you do have markets where these numbers work, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I'm pretty sure you have areas in your area where these numbers still fit into the model where they can work. Most people
100%.
stay away from them. Yeah, and so I'm going to explain to you the way I do it. I try and keep my acquisition cost at or below $30,000. Now, in different parts of the country, people are like, "Oh my God, there's 30,000. You can't buy a house for $30,000." In my area, you can. I believe in your area, you can. So I have a book on Amazon, and I have one negative review out of 200. I have one negative review, and the negative review was some guy saying, "This guy's out of his mind. You can't buy houses for those prices." And it's interesting because it's a review. You can't reply to it, but I'm thinking in my head, he's probably from New York or Long Island, where you can't get a garage for 150,000, let alone a house. And so my formula, and I'll explain to you why I do it this way, but I try and keep my acquisition cost at or below $30,000. I borrow the full amount from private lenders at 12% interest, amortized for 5 years. So I know some of you might have just threw up a little in your mouth when you heard that I'm paying 12% interest. And people say, "Well, why? Why would you pay that much?" And I'll explain to you why in just a second. But I started that way, and I've kept it that way. At 12% interest, my payment comes out to $667.33 for 60 months. 60 months, my 61st payment, when I collect the 61st payment, it's all mine. I don't have a lender anymore. The lender is only on board for 5 years, 60 payments, and then they're out of it. So a couple things I want to touch on while I'm on this slide. Why I borrow the full 30,000. So I'm going to answer a couple questions you didn't ask, but because I can't see your faces, I'm going to assume somebody's thinking it. So if I'm buying a house for 22 grand, say, I still borrow 30. If I'm buying a house for 35, I still borrow 30. The reason I do that is because I raise a lot of private money, and I raise it for my coaching students as well. Well, if I borrowed different amounts on every property, what's going to happen is the lender is going to look at this house I just got a smoking deal on for 22 grand. It's a $150,000 house, and he's going to be happy to lend on it. Then I'm going to get this other one it's worth maybe 60, but I'm getting it for 27, which he would have been happy to lend on. But now he's like, "Yeah, but compared to the last one, it's not such a good deal," which is true. It's not compared to the last one. On its own, it's still a great deal. So I don't like them to be involved with the decision-making process. The way I say every deal is 30,000. If I buy a house for 35, I put in 5 of my own. If I buy a house for 15, which I do often, I pocket that money. It comes back to me. So I just want to explain that to you. The next question that you didn't ask that I'm going to answer is, why the hell am I paying 12% interest? Which is a great question. So the reason is I started this program in 2011. And when I started, my plan was, let's make it so attractive that people can't say no. And then once I have more lenders than I have houses, I will slowly go down to 10%, 8%, and try and get the money down. Well, two different things. One is on a short-term mortgage, for those of you who are familiar with amortization schedules, on a short-term mortgage, the interest rate is almost negligible because it's almost all principal. So you borrow 30 and over 5 years you pay back 40, right? If you make that same interest rate, I believe I did it the other day, and it was like 6%, it comes out to like a $4,000 difference over 5 years. Yes, 4,000 is 4,000, not to say it's not worth it, but it's negligible. So the other reason is my lenders that I got back then in 2011 are still my lenders now, but I have an abundance of lenders now. I have more lenders than we have now. I have way more lenders even for all my coaching students than we have properties. Well, the reason is my lenders, they love it. And what happens when people love it? I always teach this, I'm sure Nick does too. People like people who are like themselves, right? So the type of people that have $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 that want to lend it and make a higher return, guess what their friends have? $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 and want to lend it at a higher return. So then they end up referring their friends. Well, I can't go to their friend and be like, "Well, you were only getting 10, but he's getting 12. So I left everybody at 12 because the way I looked at it is I'm not paying it anyway. I'm not paying a penny of it. I buy these houses and I literally have $0 into them. So this is the first step. This is my acquisition. I borrow the full amount. My payment is $667.33 for 60 months, plus the taxes and insurance. So on average, the payment I get is $875. So I don't make anything. which is what I'm going to share with you in just a second. So I don't make anything. At 875, the amount you make is negligible as well, because taxes and insurance are on top of that 667. So you don't make anything, but it's for 5 years instead of for 30. I can stand on my head for 5 years. 5 years is nothing. So now I close on the property today and tonight, and I actually had 2 of these today, I'll tell you about in a minute. So tonight, literally after closing, I immediately put it up for sale. My average price that I sell for is 89,000. So right off the bat, you're like, you just bought it for 30 today. How could you possibly sell it tonight for 89? You didn't do anything to it. And I'm going to explain that to you. Typically, I get $3,000 to $5,000 down. I'll tell you, most of the year, I get $3,000 down. First quarter, I get $5,000 down. I can't see your faces, but I can almost assume you guys understand why that is, right? Tax refund season. Tax refund season, everything goes to $5,000 down. And for the rest of the year, after about April, May, we go back down to $3,000 down. $3,000 down and $875 a month. But that's for 30 years. Our payment is for 5 years. So I want to make sure I'm not speaking too fast and losing anybody. We're buying them. We've picked out a house. We have our private lender lined up. Private lender funds the house. So we have $0 out of our pocket. Now we're selling the property. We're collecting $3,000 to $5,000 down. And the person buying the property is paying $875 a month. You're taking that money and paying your lender. And then the 61st payment on to the 360th payment is yours. You don't have any payment to make. You don't have anything left to pay out of it. On average, we make about $500 per month. So I know that doesn't sound like a huge amount of money, right? People are like, well, $500, these are lower end properties and on average payments are $875. Again, I don't know your area, what your average is going to be. People pay more for these, which you would think, wouldn't they pay less? People pay more because of the way we do it. No credit check, ownable finance, you repair, you do the work, and they love to have the pride of ownership. So on average, we make $500 per month. So how much do they end up paying? $875 a month times 360. You just bought this property for $22,000, $30,000. You sold it to them for $89,000. But how much do they actually pay? $315,000. But wait, there's more. The statistic in America, and this not for St. Louis, not for Virginia, not for anywhere, all of America, the average American moves every 5 years, which means what happens in 5 years? They could sell it if they want. It's their house and pay you off, which that would be a blessing, or they can give you back the property, or they can keep it as a rental themselves. I have plenty that keep them as rentals. Most of the time they turn over. So even though I say it's for 30 years, most of the time they turn over. I think I have a few now that have been in for 8 and 9 years, but most of the time they turn over. So for those of you who have never seen an amortization schedule, this is an evil genius guy. Whoever came up with an amortization schedule was literally genius. And so I'm just going to show you on an $89,000 mortgage, if your payment was $875, your first payment, you pay $875, $32 of that would go to principal. The balance goes to interest, right? So now you're paying on it. I'm going to go to month 120. So this is 10 years down the line. You paid $875. Now $100 goes to principal. They still owe you $81,000. So if you guys, again, I can't see your faces, but if you've never seen an amortization schedule, it's worth seeing, because that's the reason when you send in your mortgage payment, you guys have houses you live in and you send in $2,000 on your mortgage payment, then you get your statement next month and it went down by $500 and you're like, well, I sent in $2,000. The first month you had it, you sent in $2,000 and it went down by $120. And that's the genius of an amortization schedule. This puts us on the other end of that equation, which is the equation you want to be in. So remember your number. This is when I say, if you remember, everybody has a vision number, a number that if I was able to get this much per month, I can be completely free, right? If I was able to have 10,000 a month, 20,000 a month, whatever your number may be, if you were to take that number, divide it by $500, which is what I say is your average, it's a lot more than that. I say it first off because it does easy math, and I'd rather do everything based on worst case scenarios. So if you were to say you wanted, we'll use easy math, and say you were like, if I had $10,000 a month coming in before I get up in the morning, meaning not wholesaling, not rehabbing, not going to a job, $10,000 a month before I got up in the morning, what does that mean? That means you only need 20. You only need 20 of these. Well, I have people in my local area that first year with me have done 14 and 15 in 1 year. That means you only need 20. And then you have 5 years. You don't make anything for your first 5 years. You make very little. You make something, but not much. but your 61st payment, all of that money is yours. I have 115 of these now, and so it just keeps compounding. And I'm not planning on stopping. My goal is to get to 167. And everybody says, well, what did you come up with 167? That doesn't make, I'm at 115 now. The reason for the 167 is if you take the 167, divide it by the 500, times it by 12, it's $1 million a year. So that was my goal. I want to get to $1 million a year coming in before I get up in the morning, before I do a deal. And so that's why it's 167. So that's the number of slow flips you would need for your freedom. Some people's freedom is $4,000 a month. Some people say, no, I want $30,000 a month. Whatever number you have is okay, but now you have a clear plan of, okay, well, I know I need 15 a month, 20 a month. Well, that means I need 40 of these properties, and then you start working on them. And it is not that long of an equation, and I'm going to show you exactly how to handle it to make it way easy. We automate this entire process. So I have 115 right now, and I have 0 employees. I don't have any headaches. You guys, I remember when I got to 10 rental properties. When I got to 10, it started to become a job. All of a sudden, it felt like every day I had something breaking. Once I hit 10, it was like, okay, now I felt like every day there was something going on. Think about how when you got to 20, when you get to 50, I mean, you need a staff now. I need somebody to do this, somebody to do that. Well, I have 115 now, and I have nobody, and I don't do anything. I mean, I work plenty, but not in this part of my business. This part of my business is all automated. So first off, how I fill them, I write disgusting, horrible, handwritten, misspelled signs, and I'm going to explain to you why. So I used to have nice signs. My handwriting's illegible, right? You can't hardly read anything I write. Well, we always used the signs, the handwritten signs, but I never would write them because my handwriting's so bad. So one day I go out to a property and I was checking to see if the people moved out, got inside. Yes, they did move out. So I didn't have my other guy with me, and I was like, well, I'm already here, so I'll put out my signs myself. So I took out my marker and I made my own signs, and I put them out, and my phone rang off the hook. It went crazy, phone went crazy. I got the house filled. I went back to the property, picked up the signs, put them in my office. Well, about a week later, I had a guy that was working with me at the time. He comes in, he's sitting at my desk, he's standing in front of my desk, and he says, what's a CHEP house? And I was like, excuse me? And he says, what's a CHEP house? And he points to the sign. It said CHEP. It was legitimately a mistake. I know how to spell. I'm a good speller. But I legitimately wrote CHEP, CHEP house. Well, I was just laughing at myself, and I was like, oh, God, I'm such an idiot, and I can't believe I put that out. Well, then it started dawning on me why the phone blew up the way it did. Because the market that I am speaking to, they get that. And the people, if you have a nice fancy sign, which I always did, I had nice professional signs. Well, guess what? The market who I'm selling to, what are they thinking? He's going to want a $50 application fee. Then I'm probably going to get denied anyway. And I'm spending application fees all over town. When they see this disgusting, deplorable, misspelled sign, you know what they're thinking? I can work with this guy. I can do business with him. And it is amazing. And if you test it, and I always tell people, test everything. Do 1 week and put out nice signs, then go 1 week and put out crappy signs, and you're going to be surprised. The crappy signs is going to be 10 to 1, if not more than that, the response rate. Now, before I move to slides, I want to make sure to tell you, if you're buying, when you're doing the We Buy House thing, I believe in the exact opposite. When I'm buying, I would never use a handwritten sign. I'm a fan of professional-looking signs, and that because again, now you want the person to think this guy has money and can afford to buy my house. So it's two different mindsets. But when I'm selling on the owner finance program, on the slow flip method, I use handwritten misspelled signs. So I'm going into some detail here because I want you to understand how I'm doing this with no employees, no time of my own. My showing system. So I start off with signs. I only market in 3 different ways. I market with those crappy signs you just saw. I market on Facebook Marketplace, and I market on Craigslist. That's it. 3 different ways of marketing. Something else I want to touch on that is not in the slides, and I actually should add it in. Who am I selling to? And this is actually a really, really interesting question, because when I started, I was primarily selling to homeowners who wanted to work on the property while they lived in it, or they were a contractor and wanted to do some work. And I was primarily selling to homeowners, and they would have pride of ownership. They would take care of it. Well, then a few years back, whether or not you remember, they came out with the Dodd-Frank Act, right? And so when Dodd-Frank came out, I wasn't really concerned. To this day, nobody's ever been charged with anything from Dodd-Frank for owner financing, but there is laws that regulate it where you can only do 3 a year. And so I'm like, well, this is my business. I have to be legit, whether or not they're enforcing it. I didn't want to cross any lines. So I changed my model to selling to investors. And with investors, there's no regulation. You can do anything you want to investors. All the laws are to protect homeowners. So I started selling to investors, and it just blew my business up. And I'm going to explain to you how and why. Investors, 2005 Scott, me, investors who are like 2005 Scott, or who just finished, and I'm not putting anybody's class down, you guys may have been through it, but who just finished Fortune Builders training or is in their coaching program or Rich Dad, they teach their people to buy my properties. And I'm going to tell you a funny story. And so how I know this specifically. So I have a guy I've sold 3 houses to. The second house I sold him, I paid, and follow these numbers, mind you, I paid $15,000 for it. I listed it for $89,000, $3,000 down, $875 a month. I had this guy who already bought one other house for me at the time. Now he's got another one. He came out to look at it, and he said, well, can I put more money down to get the payment down to $700 a month? I said, okay, well, what do you have in mind? I always ask because I don't know how much he's talking. So he tells me, if I give you $12,000, will you give it to me for $700 a month? So I say, yes, of course. I just paid 15 for it. Now he gave me 12. Yes, of course, we'll do this deal. So now he's paying. Now he never negotiated the sales price, so he still paid 89 for it, minus his 12 grand. I financed the balance, and his payment's 700 a month. So I'm free and clear of it in like 6 months or less, which is unbelievable. And he's got a 30-year mortgage, but that's not the point of the story I'm telling you. He tells me while we're out there that he's a high-level coaching student with Fortune Builders. These are his words, mind you. And I've been well trained. I know not to buy those crappy $30,000 houses, but $89,000 is right in the sweet spot. These were his words. And it was killing me not to say something, but I have to remember my job is not to help everybody in the world. It's to help the people that I'm helping. So in his head, he didn't know he is buying a $30,000 house. He's just paying 89 for it. But yet in his program, he's probably being paraded on stage on how well he did. He bought 3 houses, all from me, all at 3 times what I paid for them. But he's still a success in their eyes. They're still putting a feather in his hat that he did so great and bought these 3 houses. Now what is he doing? Exactly what I taught you guys earlier. What is he doing? He's running around town. He's filling properties. He's fixing stuff. He's painting stuff so he can send the check up to Mr. Burns, and I'm Mr. Burns. And that's it. Every month he does the same thing. He comes in and he's got his 3 checks. So we've modified our plan now to where we primarily sell to investors. And this is the other thing that a lot of people get shocked with: investors and preachers, churches. So churches have a great deal going, and we have several. I have one church has 13 houses from me, and they love it. They're crushing it with it. So what the churches do is they'll buy the house from me, same program, 3,000 down, 875 a month. They get their people, their congregation. Every congregation has multiple tradesmen in multiple different areas to do all the work, so it doesn't cost them any rehab work. And then they do it as a program where they rent it to people in their congregation, maybe having hard times or maybe couldn't qualify for something. So it's a win all around. I have another guy that does a program for people getting out of prison, and he has 6 houses from me right now. He gets $600 per month per room from the government. And so he gets, say, a 3-bedroom, he's getting $1,800 a month. He's paying me $875. He loves it. He wants as many as he can get, but he can only be in that one specific city. And so this really changed it for me to where I'm not dealing with the homeowners anymore. I'm dealing more or less, it's a commercial transaction. And when I have a vacant property, I don't have to do most of the showing anymore. I can just text these several people that have multiple ones, are you ready for another one? But that's off topic for where I was about to go. So the showing system is another thing that a lot of people are going to absolutely lose their breath on and say, oh God, I would never do that, and think of all the 100 things that can go wrong. And I'm here to tell you, I've been doing this since 2011, and so far nothing has gone wrong. However, I fully embrace the fact that something can go wrong, but the value of my time that I've saved will outweigh anything that anyone can do. So first thing I do when I get a house, very first day, first thing I do is put the house on a lockbox. Simple as that. Before I will speak to people about it, it says it in my message, it says it on my ads on Facebook and Craigslist. They have to drive by the property and walk around it before they can call me. If someone does call me, the first thing I say to them is, have you driven by the property? Yeah, no, but no, drive by the property and then we'll talk. I don't want to waste my whole day when they finally drive out there, 90% of them aren't going to like it the second they get to the neighborhood. So I don't want to have a whole conversation on how the financing works and how everything works until I know they like the house. Does that make sense? Tell them to call. I tell them, call me an hour before you get there. I said, I'm free all the time. If I'm not available, I have a next door neighbor with a key who will come and open up the door for you. So then they call an hour in advance. When they call, I say, all right, call me when you get to the house. Exact same thing. When they call, you call me when you get to the house. If I'm not available, my next door neighbor will come right over. The reason I make them call an hour in advance is so now I know to make sure I'm looking for their call. Because the last thing in the world I want to do is have someone drive out there, then they call me and I don't answer. So I have them call an hour in advance so that I know that someone's on their way, and now I'm making sure my ringer's on and I'm answering my phone. When they arrive, I tell them my neighbor just stepped out. I said, oh, my neighbor just stepped out and ran to the store, but because you're already there, I'm going to give you the key and let yourself in. And then I walk them through the whole process. I say, you put the code to 2008, use the little black tab on the left, the front of the box will fall down, take out the key, open the door, put the key back in the box, spin the dial, take as long as you want, call me when you're ready to leave. If anybody shows up, just tell them Scott said it was okay. Now, let me tell you, you probably already guessed it, there is no neighbor, there is nobody going to show up, there's nobody else around, but I do that for a reason. I don't want to tell them in advance, yeah, you just go on your own, go whenever you feel like it, because two things happen when they don't have an appointment. They either don't show at all, or now they can say, hey, let's bring the truck, see if he's got any appliances in there. So I don't tell them till they're on the front porch that I'm letting them let themselves in. Then I tell them to call me when they're ready to leave. If they have any interest in the house, if they, sometimes they're like, okay, well now tell me how does the financing work, or are you going to do these repairs, or whatever they have questions on, we can go over it. The first time I meet them is when they're walking into my office to do the paperwork. That's it. I never see them. I never talk to them. I never meet them at the property. I don't walk them through it. I meet them for the first time when they walk into my office. My paperwork's all ready, and we do the transaction. So I know some people absolutely hate this, but if you've been in real estate any time and been showing properties, you can put a number on the time it takes you to show and how many people you'd have to show to. Not only that, how many people set appointments and then don't even show up. Or you set an appointment and they do show up, but the second they pull up in the neighborhood, they're like, oh, no way I would live here. And thank you. And you're like, well, thanks for making me drive an hour just to tell me you don't even like the neighborhood. You could have done that beforehand. So this way it puts you in the driver's seat. We never actually go out to the property. I have houses I bought based on pictures and video, and I've sold them on pictures and video, and I've never seen them. To this day, I've never seen them. I don't recommend you to do that, but I know my areas, and so something I do. So what about the condition? This is a big, big question. People say, well, yeah, but for that kind of money, you're talking about buying a house for 20 grand, 15 grand, 30 grand. These houses are going to need work, right? You're not getting, the Ritz-Carlton for 30 grand. Absolutely right. My answer on the condition is always the same, and that is you're lucky. What I mean by that is the tenant buyer on the phone is going to say, yeah, but I noticed the sink was stolen, or there's no sink in the kitchen. Are you going to put that in before we close? And my answer is no, and you're lucky we didn't do it yet, because right now it's only $3,000 down, and once we do it, it's probably going to be $5,000 or $6,000, but I know you can get it done for less than that. Oh, no, you don't do anything. We'll take it as is. Are you gonna cut the lawn? No, and you're lucky we didn't do it yet, because our guys are probably going to charge $400 or $500, and I'm sure you can get your kids to do it or do it yourself for way less than that and save you a bunch of money. Oh no, don't do it. They don't want you to do anything, because the way I word it is you're lucky we didn't do it. That's why you're getting in for $3,000. If we do the work, you're going to pay that $3,000 plus whatever the work costs, and I'm sure you can get it done much less than that. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's always my answer, and it's a great answer, is you're lucky we didn't do it yet. I've even gone so far as I had houses, and I'm sure you've seen them when you're out looking at houses, filled with garbage. I mean, there's bottles and cans and cereal boxes or whatever it may be, and I sell them just like that. That's my program. Everything is as is, and you're lucky we didn't clean it up yet. So this is a house that we had a tenant move out on, and when I got inside, I realized that the tenant never actually lived in it. They kind of just took this house as like a staging area for some kind of newspaper scam they were doing. I don't really know what they were doing, but there was mounds and mounds and mounds of papers in every room in the house. So this was one of the rare examples where I left out of there, and I was like, Kevin was with me, he's a friend of mine, and I said, I'm going to have to do something here. There's no way I can do this house as is. I mean, it was literally, when I say it was going up the walls, huge amounts of papers, and I'm like, I'm going to have to do something while I'm at this house, right? But as I always do, I'm already there, so I put signs out. One day later, I have two people fighting with me over getting the house, as is, looking like this, as is, and one of them left crying. And she ended up actually buying a different house from me. But at the time, that day, she was literally upset and crying. And my rule is, and again, you can do whatever rules you want to do, but my rule is first come, first serve. And the reason I do first come, first serve is because I don't do any credit checks, and I never want to be I never want to be told, oh, you discriminated, or you sold it to her and not me, or anything. And so my rule is always the same. The first person to put the money in my hand is the one who gets it. I don't do any checks. I don't check your job. I don't check anything. All I check is that you have the $3,000 or the $5,000, and that's it. And so because of that, I'm strict on first come, first serve. And so that's why I ended up with two people and one crying, because the other one got there before they did. And this is, I mean, literally what the houses look like. So now I'm going to show you a video of the worst one I ever did, the worst one. And the reason I want to show this to you is because I bought a package of houses. Are you guys able to hear that? Are you able to hear that?
It's a little slow.
Okay. Well, I didn't want you to hear it, but I know on Zoom they couldn't hear it, so I just didn't want to talk if you were able to hear it.
Oh yeah,
So,
I think we could. If you hit play again, we can hear it. You know what? We see it, but we don't hear it.
Okay, that's fine. So this particular house, I bought a package of 24 houses, and I did not do my own proper due diligence. I got a smoking deal on them, 24. It came out to about 21,000 per house. So this particular one, there was two of them were boarded up, and he insinuated like he just did it to protect the house. He never told me there was a fire in this house. So I'm away on vacation, and my guy, who you're here doing this video, he calls and tells me, he's like, did you know that house had a fire? And I'm like, no. And he starts telling me about it. Well, first I was horribly upset because I'm like, man, he got me, I should have checked it better, my own fault. But then I was like, you know what? I can give this house away. I can give it to a church, donate it, whatever, and I still got a really good deal. It makes me at like $22,000 a house instead of 21, right? So I was like, screw it, it's okay, everything's going to be fine, no big deal. Well, my guy still did the same thing he normally does. We put up signs, and I'm going to explain to you my guy. I just told you I have no employees, and now I'm talking about a guy. I'm going to explain that to you in a minute. So he put up his signs, and in days, we got a contractor who fully rehabbed it. So I sold it in the condition you're looking at. Deplorable, fire, burned, and if you were to go by there now, it's a new house. It's got new roof, new walls, new carpet, new paint, new cabinets. It's a brand new house, and this is the condition he bought it in. And so I know a lot of times people can't fathom what I'm telling you because they're like, there's no way. There is a way, and I'm going to explain to you why. So the reason is there's a whole subset of people that can't qualify. So for them, it's opportunity. And it's really, really important to take your own mind out of it because you're looking at it like you're like, there's no way I would pay. I think we did that one cheaper. I think we did for $59,000. But you're like, there's no way I would pay $59,000 for that and then have to put all the money into rehabbing. You're right, you wouldn't. But there's tons of people that are not trained in real estate investing. They just want to do something, or this particular guy was a contractor and he's got contracting crews. What he does with us is he renovates houses. He has a contracting company, a bunch of crews. He renovates these houses with his own crews, and then he lets his guys live in them. And he's got 3 or 4 from us now. And so it's a win for him. It's a win for us. So I'm going to show you, and you're not going to be able to see, you're not going to be able to hear, but this particular one I want to show you because this is one of the rare ones where I have a before and an after. So this particular one, I'm going to fast forward a little, just so you can see the condition when I bought it. I bought this one for $20,000. Which I think was a really good deal. It was in better condition than most we get. And again, I don't know the types of houses you have in that price range in your area. This area is called Newport News, Virginia. It's one of the 7 cities of Hampton Roads. And just so you can kind of get a glimpse of the condition, I'm fast forwarding a little bit for you. So you can see the kitchen. Pay close attention to the kitchen too, because I'm going to show you in the next one what he's done to it. So now I'm just telling you, I just purchased this house. I borrowed $30,000. I left closing with $7,000 cash. So I bought this house with no money, left closing with $7,000. That was after paying for closing costs and everything. And then about a week later, I got another $3,000 down payment from the buyer. And So I got $3,000 from the buyer and $875 a month, and my payment is $667. So this is that same house. I'm just gonna fast forward a little bit so you can see what he's done. Now keep in mind, I did not spend a dollar on this house. I have $20,000 invested, and that's it. This is a whole lot better than renting, where you're the one, you spend all this money just to let a tenant come in and then damage everything. I spend nothing. All new. Granite cabinets, appliances, lighting, everything's new. Not on my dollar, on his. And the guy who bought it, he's got 3 houses from us now. This is him right back here. I think we should. And he loves us. And the only text I ever get from him is, do you have any more houses? I have a cousin who's moving into the area and wants a house, or I have a new crew coming. Do you have any more houses? And you're looking for more properties from us. And it's amazing when you think about the quality of the house I gave them, the quality of the house they turn it into, and they did all the work. It's their money. They did all the work. And so a couple of questions that you didn't ask also I want to mention. 89,000. So that's the number I typically sell all my houses for. So people ask, tenants will ask, people that will learn this will ask, and they'll say, well, how'd you come up with 89,000, right? So the reason they're 89,000, people say, well, how 89,000? There's one for sale on the block for 40. Why would I pay 89? I say, well, if you found one for 40, I would buy that one. Well, that one I have to pay cash for. Well, then I would buy this one. That's kind of how I answer it. People, they're like, yeah, but I found one way cheaper over there. I said, well, then I'd buy the cheaper one. That makes sense. Yeah, but that one you got to pay cash. Well, then I would buy mine. And that's exactly how I tell it to them. Sometimes they'll say it's not worth $89,000, and I say, well, let me stop you right there. Everything, and I'll usually use a woman's pocketbook if there's a woman there. I'll say everything is worth what someone's willing to pay for it. Everything. You take your pocketbook and you put it in a Louis Vuitton store, and they're going to charge you $1,500 or $2,500 for it. Same pocketbook in Walmart is $25. Is it worth $2,500? Well, if someone's willing to pay for it, it is. And that's exactly how I answer them. I say somebody is going to buy this house for $89,000 in the next week or two. It doesn't have to be you. And I'm blatantly, brutally honest with people, but that's the way it is. If they have a problem with the price, they don't have to buy it. But the reality is this: they're going to be paying that payment anyway. You're going to either be paying that rent to somebody, or you're going to be paying that payment to somebody. Why not have the ownership? Why, when I bought those properties, I told you I bought a package of 24 properties. Probably about 15 of them were rented at the time, and I dreaded that because I don't do rentals. I have no maintenance. I have no staff. I don't have a hotline to call for repair. And so the very first thing I did is I sent everybody a letter saying, hello, and we purchased this property. We do not do rentals. However, we will honor the balance of your lease. If you're interested, we sell properties with owner financing because you're already in it. We will not charge you any down payment. Your payment will only change to, and I make it a round number. So if they were paying $750, I might make it $756. I try and make it seem more like a mortgage number to them. And no money out of your pocket, and and I go through the whole thing with them. Every single one of them converted. Every single one of them. And that's what I want, because I don't want someone to say, well, you bought it, you're stuck with my lease, and I am stuck. If they were to say, no, I just want to finish out my lease, I would have to finish it, and if they said something was broke, I'd have to fix it, because that's the law. But I gave them all the opportunity to buy with no money out of pocket. Since they're already in it, I just want my payments to stay. I'm not in it for the down payment. We charge the down payment, but I'm in it for the monthly payment. The down payment is so they have a barrier to entry, so they have skin in the game. So while I'm touching, and I know I'm jumping all over, but I want to tell you about the guys I had working and the down payment. So as much as I told you I have 0 employees, I have nobody work with me, I do have some people that work, I call them bounty hunters, but they work on their own, and they are allowed to fill my properties when I have vacancies, and they get to keep half the down payment as their fee. So right now I have 4 guys who do it, and they're not just for me. They do all of my coaching students' houses. They also have clients who are just friends of mine, And so when I get a vacancy, I just send a text, new property, 123 Main Street, 3,000 down, 875, 89,000. It's on a lockbox. The code's 2008. And that's it. And then all four of them get it simultaneously. All four of them start marketing it, go out and do pictures and video. And then as soon as somebody gets money in hand, they put on that same text string, 123 Main Street is sold. And that's it. And so I'm completely hands off. I mean, completely. I think I told you, I had two get filled today. And both of them were not me filling them. And I get a text saying it's gone. And now I'm back to 0 vacancies. And absolutely love it. So I have no employees. I let anybody do it. Anybody who wants to fill my properties can fill them. But I have 4 people that do it as their main thing that they do. I'm not going to get into the paperwork, although I will send it to you guys if you want it. The reason I'm not going to get into it is because all contracts are state specific and mine is specific for Virginia. So it's an agreement for deed, which is basically a mortgage, but it's the difference, and this is the way I explain it to my buyers, so I'm going to explain it to you the same way. When you buy a house through the bank, the deed goes in your name and then you pay on it for 30 years. When you buy a house from me, you pay on it for 30 years and then the deed goes in your name. It's the exact same end result. And so I'm not going to go through all the paperwork with you only because it's going to be different in your state, but more or less everything's different in every state.
Yeah, and we can get into that maybe later in Q&A, but there's the mechanics behind what you're talking about is slightly different. There's no need to do a contract for deed in our state, but we can get to that later. So just continue on.
Okay, excellent. This next page would work in any state, and it's not a real paper. I made this up, and I'll tell you why I made it up and how much it works. So all that's on this page is nothing fancy. It's literally same exact stuff that's in your original paperwork, but I make them initial next to each thing. That's critical. What I found over the years was that people would come in and agree, and then a week later or a month later, they would get amnesia. And you never told me I was responsible for that. You never told me. And so I started this sheet, which I call it a dummy letter. I used to call it a dummy letter. Now I call it a compliance sheet because I'm trying to be more PC. But this is it's basically saying they understand from this moment forward, they're responsible for any and all repairs at their own expense. I make them initially. You understand that you have inspected the property to your satisfaction and are comfortable moving forward. Because people would be like, oh, but I never had a chance to inspect. Well, you signed here saying you did. You understand if you have any payment arrangements that they must be bound, that there's a late fee after the 5th, after the 12th. If we have to file an unlawful detainer, there's a $95 administrative fee. And then the very bottom lets them know that we, being me, have done no inspections to the property. Several properties I bought and never even seen. So I don't want them to act like, oh, you knew and didn't tell me. I'm letting them know I have never seen, I have done no inspections, and I know nothing about the property. So I'm going to tell you a little story about this sheet once, just to let you know why I do it still, and I advise you to do it because there is no laws with this because it's not even a real document. I had a girl once who was in the Navy, and she had purchased a house from me and was going through amnesia, saying, oh, he didn't tell me I was responsible. Well, being in the Navy, we're a big Navy town, and being in the Navy, they have JAG lawyers, which are basically, so they have their own lawyers that will, if they were to get something happen, they will take up for them on their behalf. So this attorney calls me, a JAG attorney calls me, and she starts, she says you didn't tell her she was responsible for the repairs. She says this, she said, and the lady's being really rude and abrupt with me. So, and I was like, well, did she give you all the paperwork? And she's like, she gave me, whatever. And I said, do you have a fax machine? And this shows you how long ago this was. We used fax machines. And so I faxed her this sheet, and I can hear her on the phone. I can hear her talking to the girl at her desk, the one that was my tenant. As she's getting this machine out of her fax, she starts yelling to her. She's like, did you sign this paper? And the girl, and then she goes, I'm sorry we wasted your time, sir. Have a nice day. And I was amazed because this lady was literally like chewing me down and yelling at me. And as soon as she saw this paper, she started yelling at that girl and apologized to me for wasting my time. And so again, this is not a legal document, but it clarifies that they know everything that they're getting into. So nobody can say, I didn't know, he didn't tell me, which is what they will want to tell you. So the last thing I want to touch on, and then we'll do questions and answers, is should you pay off your rental properties? And this is the ongoing debate of a lifetime. And Nick, to be honest, I don't even know what you teach them to do. Most people teach you not to pay off your rentals. And so I want to tell you, if you were to ask your attorney, right, most attorneys, unless they're into real estate investing, most attorneys will say, no, you don't want to pay off your properties. Why? Because you're going to be a magnet for lawsuits. People are going to see they're free and clear, and now you're a magnet for lawsuits. They're right. However, there's ways to encumber your properties. We're not going to get into that today, but there's ways to still have liens on your properties that you're not paying a mortgage on. But your lawyer's right, but keep in mind your lawyer's job is to protect you, not to make you more money. So keep that in mind. If you were to ask your accountant, your CPA, there may even be a CPA on here. So unless your CPA is a real estate investor and thinks differently, most CPAs will tell you, no, 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 you don't want to pay off your rentals because you're going to lose your biggest tax break. And they're right. But you got to keep in mind your accountant's job is to save you money in taxes, not to make you more money. So, we've all heard this before. I'd rather pay the taxes and keep the dollar. I'd rather, instead of paying $1 and getting a 30-cent deduction, I'd rather pay the dollar. I'd rather keep the dollar and pay out the 30 cents in taxes. Does that make sense? But your accountant's job is to save you money in taxes, and you will lose that deduction once the property's free and clear. He's right, but you get to keep the cash. So let's not overlook the part where you get to keep the cash. So lastly is your calculator. So your calculator is a computer. It knows no lies. It knows no opinions. It only knows facts. And your calculator will tell you should not pay off your properties. Because if you were to put all the data into your calculator is going to say, nope, you will make more money by pulling out this money and using leverage. And your calculator is right. You will make more money, providing everything goes right and stays in the path that, is perfect. But I always jokingly say your calculator is missing a button, and that's your peace of mind button. Your calculator is missing a button, which is your peace of mind button. And I've had complete peace of mind since 2011, since I revamped my business. I didn't get to appreciate it so much until we just had this recent corona, because all it was so reminiscent of me when we're locked down. It was so reminiscent of 2007. And what I went through in 2007 was mayhem. And what I went through this time was I was like, I'm just going to stay home for a couple months and sit by the pool. And that's exactly what I did. And I had zero stress and I had zero concerns. And I'm like, it's a whole different ballgame. And so my answer for people is, yes, I believe in paying off properties. I know there's people that absolutely hate the idea of that. And that's why I wanted to start off with going through some of how I got to be thinking the way that I'm thinking. And, that's why I will never go back. I don't have any debt now. I don't have on my house. I don't have car payments. I don't have mortgages. I still have some mortgages, but they're all 5 years or less till they're done. I have no debt. And people teach debt. You can make so much money with debt, and they're absolutely right. I can't say that they're wrong or they're lying. It's all right as long as everything goes perfect. And I've just come to the conclusion that that's not the route I want to take. So one other thing, that's the end for this, and we're going to take some questions. But one other thing I wanted to touch on that I didn't make a slide. I got to make notes to myself to add this in, is where do you find these properties? And so there's an interesting thing about why they even exist. Why do slow flips even exist? And I'm trying to, there we go, trying to end this so I can see you guys again. Now, again, I don't know your area and I don't know your neighborhoods, but in my area, I call it real estate purgatory. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. They are landlords, conventional landlords, who like to buy properties for rentals, right? And then there's flippers, rehabbers, who want to buy properties to rehab them and sell them. Real estate purgatory, as I call it, where I buy my slow flips, or where nobody wants them. The landlords don't want them because you guys know if you're buying rentals, and I'll agree with you, don't buy in low-end neighborhoods. They're the highest headache, the highest turnover, the highest repairs. I would never, before I started slow flips, I would not buy in these neighborhoods. I would not buy low-end properties. They're the worst. They're the absolute worst. So some landlords buy them because they're new or foolish, but professional landlords will not buy in these neighborhoods, period. They'd be a fool to. Secondly is the rehabbers. Rehabbers don't buy there because there's no ARV, there's no after repair value. So rehabbers, it's a steal and they can buy it and renovate it, but they're not going to be able to sell it. So these neighborhoods are stuck in purgatory where nobody wants them. All of my area, before the bust, these same houses I'm talking about were all about $100,000 to $120,000. All of my area, we have 2.5 million people here. All of my area has recovered back to where we were at the bust or above, except for these certain neighborhoods that are real estate purgatory. They never recovered. And so that is why we can buy in these neighborhoods and these neighborhoods alone. I jokingly tell people that these are a gift we got from the bust, because we couldn't do this. This whole plan, people ask one of my good friends who's a lender of mine, people ask him, and he's 69 now. They're like, well, how come you haven't done this? And he's like, we couldn't. This didn't exist. We couldn't buy houses for 30 grand. Our cheapest houses pre-2007, the cheapest house we could find was 100 grand. The worst neighborhoods was 100 grand. We're buying houses now at 15 grand, 22 grand, 25 grand. It's a gift that we've been given from the bust. And so that is why, originally I was like, okay, when I get to 60, I'm going to stop. And when I get to 80, I'm going to stop. And my friend Tom, who I was just talking to, I have lunch with him a lot, and he's a mentor of mine. And I asked him, I said, well, I think I'm going to stop when I get to, 60. I think that's enough. And he doesn't have many words, and his words exactly where he says, keep buying. And I'm like, but why? I have enough to pay everything. I have no bills. And he says exactly the same thing. He says, why would you not? He says, it doesn't cost you anything. Literally, like if I come across it, I buy it. It doesn't cost me anything. I have lenders who fund it. I have people who fill it. The whole process is done, and it's no work on my part and no money out of my pocket. He's like, why would you not? And then I say, well, when's enough enough? How many? Like now I say I want 167, right? I said, well, when's enough enough? And his answer, which I love, is he says the market will tell you when it's over. When you can't find houses in this price range anymore that you can pay off in 5 years, it's over. And so after I got that through my head, I was like, full force, let's go. And I'm not slowing down. So one other thing I didn't answer is where do you find them? I told you the neighborhoods, but from people as well. So we find them through our conventional marketing, right? Our regular marketing that I'm sure you're doing, be it signs or direct mail or internet or whatever marketing you're doing. Some houses will just fall into that category. When you research it, you're like, oh, you're trying to find an ARV and there's no retail sales. So automatically I go into that appointment knowing it's a slow flip if I get it. The other way, and this is an interesting thing people don't think about, where we get a lot of them, is from other wholesalers.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is most people don't want these properties. They have no use for them. And so I think I told you I have a couple people in my group did 14 and 15 last year. Probably 10 of them each were from other wholesalers. Because I teach them, I say, go to all of your competitors, get on their list, put them on your list, every single one of them. Well, you'll be surprised how many times, and I got one guy who's looking at one tomorrow. I looked at it and I told him, I said, well, negotiate it as best you can, and if you don't buy it, I'll buy it. I'll buy it at what the guy's asking because it's a great deal. It's from another wholesaler. And I looked at it and I'm like, because nobody wants them. You know who wants them? My people. I have 107 people in my group here locally, and we're the ones buying them up. Nobody outside of my group has any use for them. So keep that in mind. If you're like, oh, where am I going to find them? Call Google, sell my house fast in your cities, and then go to all your competitors and add yourself as on their buyers list, add them to your buyers list. Same thing when you see signs, when you know your competitors. When you find all your competitors, get on their buyers list. A lot of people don't want to work with their competitors. They feel like they're strengthening them. Don't worry about them. Strengthen your competitors. You're the one getting the long-term hold. All right, I think I got everything covered that I wanted to cover, but more importantly, I want to answer any questions because I know a lot of times people have questions and they're like, yeah, but what about this? But what about this? And so go ahead, and I don't know how this works, if you're going to type it in or if you're able to speak. But if you have questions, by all means, ask them because I would love to hear them and get them out of your head.
Sure. Let me start no one likes to be the first question here. So let me start by saying, first of all, thank you for joining us here tonight and taking time out of your day to come out and do this. You can tell you're extremely passionate about this, and I really appreciate you being here tonight.
You're very welcome. And Nick, you have no idea how much I love slow flips because nobody knows. And that's why I love when I have people change their mindset and then call me and say, I got 6 now, I got 10. Because all I know is I have one kid, I call him a kid, he's 30 now, but when I got him, he was 27. His whole life has changed. He's going to be a multimillionaire now. I've only had him for 3 years. And I'm like, I love that more than anything because he's like, la, la, la to everyone else. He's like, I'm just going to do what you tell me. And he's crushing it. I'm sorry. I know you were speaking. I cut you off.
No, I mean, that's because you're passionate about it. And that's why you cut me off, because you really do love this. I just looked up in Jennings here, which would be a great, so St. Louis City and St. Louis County are 2 different counties, and combined it's like one big city. But when you ever hear about crime rates for St. Louis or city of St. Louis is in the decline, it's because the actual city of St. Louis is only about 350,000 people. And St. Louis County and St. Louis City is its own county, and St. Louis County has the bulk of the people, and that has I think like 90 different municipalities inside of St. Louis County. So each county has like its own, government. It has its own police force, its own fire department, and everything like that. And so it makes it really hard for the rehabbers to have code compliance when we rehab a house, because every municipality is different, and it's kind of a hard environment to do business in from that aspect. However, Jennings is a place inside of St. Louis County that there's several different municipalities that would be really good. But Jennings is a place I just looked up. There's 15 houses under $30,000 in Jennings, all right there on the MLS without having to call a wholesaler or do anything. And the rents in Jennings are, depending upon where you go, anywhere from 750 to 900, and that's just perfect slow flip model.
Yep, and people pay more to own. So the other flip side to the, and I didn't talk about this tonight, and you probably teach it, Nick, is the raising private money, and that's a huge part of it because that's what makes it all possible. Because right now, and I can't see anyone's faces, you all have your video off, but
Yeah,
right now
everyone turn your videos on. Come on.
somebody might be thinking right now, I'll buy those 10, but you have to have the lenders. If you have the lenders who are ready, when's my next? Because the only time I hear from my lenders is when they're like, okay, I'm ready for 3 more, I'm ready for 2 more, because they know it's 30,000. So when they say 2 more, they mean they have 60 grand to deploy. So the only time I hear from them is that. So if you know you've already raised the money and you have the lenders, that's as easy as finding the properties and saying yes. All you have to do is say yes. They fund it, you fill it, and you wait out time. And it's not
So
30 years.
an obvious question. Some of our folks are blessed and have a couple bucks that they have earmarked towards real estate investing. Can someone just go out and pay cash for this and just get the private lender?
So there's 2 different answers to that. So first off, absolutely. So you can absolutely pay cash for them. The only reason why I still say to raise money is because even if I don't know how much money you have. Let's say you have 300,000. Let's say you have 3 million. Whatever the number amount is, it's finite.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you're going to wish you had the cash. So the way I look at it is, yes, if you want to buy some cash, you can pay cash for them. So you can buy cash and you can pay cash, and then as that money builds, you wait it out and then use that to buy your next one. But it's going to be a much slower process. So if you only have 100 grand, it means you're going to buy 3. Or if you had 200 grand. So I like to just say you raise the money. But yes, so I have an IRA, a self-directed 401k, and I started doing last November solely in that, so I don't pay taxes, and I have 8 in there now. But I didn't put any money in. I did 1 wholesale in there, and then I used that money and did another deal, and so I have 8 properties free and clear in there now in 1 year. That's all without me putting in. I started it with 5 grand and then just did deals in there. So I love that plan of paying for them cash, but it's finite. You can't just go crazy and buy as much as you want because it's limited to how much money you have.
Precisely. Okay, so you walked through your whole thought process of where you were, why no one wants to touch these properties and why you didn't want to touch them beforehand, and then went through the crash and took it in the teeth and changed your mindset, changed your model. And now do you just do slow flips? You do other deals as well, right?
I do wholesale. Yeah, I do wholesales. And I stopped rehabbing in 2013. 2013 was a big year for me. I did my first 30-day trip in 2013. We spent a month in Panama. And when you have a month away, I don't know if anybody's ever done a month away. When you spend a month away, you have a lot of time to think. And what I realized on that trip was I had a lot of employees back then, and I realized I worked for them. They didn't work for me. And I was doing jobs to keep my contractors working. I was buying things I wouldn't have bought otherwise because I didn't want my guy who was the buyer to not get his commission. And so I literally got back from that trip, and the day I got back, I fired everybody. And I've been by myself ever since, and I'm so much happier, and I do a fraction of the deals I used to do, and I make 10 times the money. We're all taught, a lot of you guys are like, oh, scale. If you watch anybody's seminars, they're always teaching to scale and grow and scale and grow. And I'm the opposite. I'm like, nope, I'm one guy, and it's just me, and I'm more than happy.
Boy,
I'm not trying.
Are you preaching to the choir, brother? I mean, the amount of headaches that I have that I'm still cleaning up messes from is from employees 3 and 4 or 5 years ago.
I used to have to do my first 3 deals every month was to break even.
Yeah.
I had to do 3 deals a month to break even. I averaged 5 deals a month. But if I had a month where I did 0 deals, the next month I had to do 6. And that's just to break even. And then it got to the point where you were always chasing. I was always chasing. I was doing more deals than ever, but I wasn't making any money.
You want to talk about some stress? That's some stress right there. I'm just stressed out. My heart rate's raising just you talking about that.
And everybody's like, you're crushing it. You did 6 deals last month. Yeah, I did 6 deals, but all the money, I'm getting big checks, but it's all going to feed the beast. And now I get a check for 30 grand. I picked up one today for 40 grand. It's mine. I have no overhead now. And so it's a whole different ball game than what it used to be.
So, okay. So anyway, you walked us through that whole thing, and I know that you're not a one-trick pony. You do other stuff as well. That's why I wanted to say that. But um, let's kind of get to some of the mechanics on this because you use a contract for deed and you showed the contract, and that's when I said, hey, let's just skip ahead because I want to talk to that in person. Here in Missouri, there's really no need for a contract for deed, and what we found is, I know the reason why you do it is because in your area, you said it was like almost $5,000 to foreclose on somebody.
Yes.
Okay, in our area, it's less than $1,000 to foreclose on somebody.
How long does it take?
In the city of St. Louis, I'm sorry, in Missouri, it takes 28 days.
Well, if that was the case, I would do actual owner financing. I
Correct.
love that. I would love that because then the deed's not even in your name, so you have no liability to anything. You don't have to have insurance. I still keep insurance now, so I love that a lot.
Right. Yeah. So it's less than a month to foreclose, and it's probably another $500 to hire an attorney for an eviction. So it really just doesn't make sense to do the contract for deed here. It's just straight owner financing, and you keep the first deed of trust. If you have the private lender, like you said, you keep the first deed of trust out there until it's paid off, and after the fifth year, then you're Mr. Burns still collecting all the money.
Yeah, I look at Mr. Burns in a whole different light these days.
Yeah. So who's
I like.
Smithers? Is Smithers his assistant?
Yeah, I believe that was his assistant.
Oh, okay. All right. Because when you
So I'm
first brought
gonna.
him up, oh, go ahead.
I didn't tell you a story too. I wanted to tell you guys, and if I'm keeping you too late, just let me know. I know it's 10:30 my time, so what does that mean? It's 9:30 your time. So I just did a slow flip that I really wanted to share with you because in my opinion, it is the greatest slow flip of all time. Right? So I want to share with you the
Sure.
details on it. This is a
Yep.
commercial building, which kind of changed. Up until then, I've only done it with small single family houses, but I got a lead. It was not a Shriners. What are the other guys? A Mason temple, a Masonic temple, Masonic lodge. So it was a two-story, about 8,000 square foot brick building on a big piece of land, right in the middle of a neighborhood. They've owned it since the 50s, 1950s. I have to say 19 now because we're almost, looping again. So this guy calls me. He's referred me a bunch of deals, and he's on the inside. He's in that club, and he tells me I can get it for 195. City assessment on it was about 500,000, right? But it's a brick building. I don't know what the heck I'm going to do with it. So I started trying to sell it off as lots. I marketed it to a bunch of people. I wanted 350 for it. It was going to crush it, make 150 grand on it. That's what I wanted. And I couldn't. The highest offer I got was about 260, which still would have been decent. But then I was out there looking at, because they were complaining it was going to cost too much to remove the building. It would have fit about 7 houses, but the building was a big brick building and it was going to cost a ton to remove it. And then I was out there and I had this genius idea. And I got to say, it really was genius idea. So to the left, there was a big section of the lot that was fronted on a side street. Well, what I did was I broke off 3 lots and kept the building. I sold the 3 lots for 60,000 each, 60,100, figure 60. So I got $180,000 back on those 3 lots. Then I sold the building on a slow flip, $25,000 down, 4,977 a month, figure 5,000 for 360 months on a 30-year mortgage. 499 is the sales price. So from day one, but it took me a little bit more. So it took me about a month and a half to break up the lots. But from the get-go, I'm in it for nothing. I got all my money back from the lots and the down payment on the building, and now I got $60,000 a year, 60,000 a year from one property, pure profit, nothing out of pocket on it. And I'm like, that's just the greatest slow flip ever. And it opened up my mind to, I've only done single family houses up until now, but it opened up my mind to maybe I'll look at other stuff. Maybe, because people embrace the owner financing more than anything. There's people who want things, but well, they know they don't qualify. They don't have the money to put down, and the
Mhm.
no credit check, the owner financing changes that whole equation. And so it's really opened up my mind to start looking at different things that you can put into the same model. One of the things I tell people is we don't sell houses, we sell financing. The house comes with it. And I always tell people, I say, what we're selling is the financing. The house comes with it. That's what they're buying. They're buying the fact that they can get a mortgage with no credit check and only $3,000 down. The house is the byproduct. Sorry for cutting you off, Nick. You're going to have to stop me. Put me on mute or something.
No, no, no. I did earlier. You just kept going, and I just put you on mute.
Uh,
You didn't realize it. So,
it happens.
um, but so I guess, yeah, let's open up to questions. I know that we got some really interested folks here wanting to ask some questions. What, uh, Jamie, I haven't seen you in a little while. What's going on, brother?
What's the longest
Uh,
period of time? Oh, I'm sorry. I was just reading somebody text in a question.
I'm
What's up, Jamie?
I'm dated with fixing up houses, Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I when you sent me a link to a video that Scott that you did a while back, I was driving back from a rental. This is like in February maybe, and we had just left there, and I was literally physically ill because they had turned into a hoarder's house that was infested with roaches, and I'm like, this is insane. And I was already arriving at that sort of thinking that I think where people miss on rentals a lot, and this is just me. A lot of people do great with rentals, more power to you. But I was like, I think they really miss what it really costs to keep up a house because I started calculating in my head what it was going to cost me, us, to deal with this thing. I mean, I got 1,500 in dumpsters.
Yeah.
Um, I'm like, great, we made 250 a month for a couple of years in cash flow. It's gone. And I'm like frustrated. I'm really, it's like kind of starting to lose my enthusiasm for real estate investing. And I'm like, I love this business. And that part where you explain, you said you literally, it was like almost like you were talking to me. And it like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I'm like, this can't be real, but I got it. And I mean, the fact that you're on here doing this is amazing because my wife and I have been talking about this for about a month
Yeah.
now.
Hi, Renee.
Through, um, we clear out, some of these projects that are these lingering projects, including Accomack, which is almost done, Nick, and it's amazing. Um,
I saw some pictures.
yeah, it's super cool. But no, I mean, without a doubt, this is absolutely a strategy because the other part that really spoke to me was I mean, just the sheer amount of time which I enjoy the work. I don't mind the work. It's fine. But I'm getting to an age where it's like, I want to enjoy and just not have to be a slave to these businesses and these houses. And again, it took a few minutes for it to sink in that it was like you were buying these things, you don't even take a single bag of trash out, and people are buying them later. I'm like, it goes against everything we've been brainwashed or taught to believe. But it's so great that it was like, but it has to be real. Like it totally makes sense to me. So I don't really have any questions per se, because again, I know we obviously have to talk about the paperwork section, but I have a broker in the house that can handle all the paperwork and stuff, which is pretty cool. So
Let me tell you
anyway,
something crazy about the condition. This is mind-boggling to me. When I have a house, sometimes I buy one and it's like beautiful showroom move-in ready condition, or someone moved out and they renovated and it's perfect. For whatever reason, and I can't get into their mindset, it takes longer for me to fill 100% of the time. When the house is showroom ready, it'll sit vacant for me for a month and a half. And I have that same house that's falling apart in a dump and I sell it in a day. And the only conclusion that I came up with as to why that is because I think when the houses are nice, the buyers feel it's too good to be true. It's got to be a scam. Why is he letting me get this without a credit check? Why is it so little down? And I think that they put up their walls thinking there's something scam going on here. And when the house is trashed, they know why they're getting the deal. When there's garbage bags in there, they understand why they're getting that deal. And at least that's what I've convinced myself as to the reason why. One time I was joking with my friend. I said, I'm going to go over and kick holes in the walls because the house was so perfect and I couldn't fill it. And every other house that was trashed was filling up right away. I was like, what is going on here?
well, you could probably rent it for a year and let somebody trash it for you, and then
No, I'm done.
trash it. I mean, come on, it's genius.
All right, so let's get to Winnie's question. What's the
Yeah.
longest period of time it's taken you to find a buyer for your properties?
So I have had one that sat for probably 3 months. And part of it's my fault. Like if I had 5 vacancies, I'm on it and I'll get them all done in a week. When I have 1 vacancy, I'm like, there's only one, and so it's my own fault. But what I tell people that are new in it, or even not new, I mean, I tell everybody to do this. I say, keep your down payment. Don't think that you got that money and now go buy a new pocketbook with it. If you got 3,000 down, leave it in the account. So then if and when that person does move out, if it's within the first 5 years and you still have to make a payment, Well, now you got 4 months worth of payment if you had to, where you can just go ahead and pay it and it's not stressing you, it's not coming out of your money. So when you put somebody in, my opinion is always keep the down payment, keep any money. This, I'm going to tell you something that people find offensive. I tell people you do not deserve to make $1 with your rental properties until they're free and clear. That's the way I look at it. If it's positive 100 a month, 200 a month, whatever it is, I say, well, that money stays until you pay off that house and now it's yours. Until then, it's not yours. You work for the bank. You have a job. They've convinced us that it's a good job, but you have a job. Your job is to send money to the bank every month. So until you pay off the house, it's not really yours. It's not your money. And so that's my personal opinion, and that's why I kind of word it so harshly with people. I say you don't deserve $1 till you get this thing paid off, and then you can live the life you want. I know people that have 1 and 2 houses that can literally retire, like a bit more expensive houses, but it had houses they bought years and years ago and couldn't sell them, so they ended up keeping them as rentals, and now they're paid off, and they might be making $4,000 a month from those 2 houses, and they're like, well, I never planned on being in real estate, and those 2 houses is my retirement. I mean, and I'm like, well, how amazing is this tiny little bit of houses? Makes all the difference in the world. And so, but free and clear is what changes everything. Otherwise, you just have a job working for the bank.
So generally, you buy a house on a Monday, you go over, you put your lockbox on, you put your signs up, you start getting calls the next day, the next week.
We have a system set up now, and I'm gonna get you guys more questions than answers by answering this. So we use a CRM called Deal Factory. I think we may have spoken about it, Nick. And what it is they give you the phone numbers, and so it captures every single phone number of anybody who's ever called. So anybody who called off a sign, off Craigslist, off anything, it captures their number, right? So when we get a new property, we can make one text, and it goes to every single person who's ever called on any other properties. And it just says, hey, new property, 123 Main Street. So literally now we're so streamlined that it's like minutes. I mean, we put it out, and they know it's going to go. The people who get the text because they've tried before and said, oh, sorry, it's gone. So they know it's going to go. And so it's almost like a frenzy when we get a new one. I mean, but it wasn't always that way. But right now we just got it so streamlined that when something comes vacant, it's gone.
Mm-hmm. So something, if you could off the top of your head, maybe a percentage of ones that you think are going to go to full term, 30 years, a percentage of people that are there for a year and then just bail. And how do you handle that? And how many people refinance or how many people sell it? What do you think those numbers are?
So I don't have specific numbers, but I can tell you so far in my life, I've had one that actually sold it. I have some people who are my original people. More often than not, they turn over every 2-3 years. I have some people who've been in there 8 years, 7 years, but more often than not, they turn over every 2-3 years. I'm going to tell you one interesting story. And Steve, I think I couldn't tell if you were talking a minute ago and you were on mute. I couldn't hear you. So if you were on mute, we'll get back to you in 1 second. So
I was answering my wife across the room. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So I have one house. I had a girl for 12 years, and she moved into 3 houses. This is something that's so interesting to me about education, which is why, like you guys, I can't stress enough how you're in the right place to be being trained, as opposed to just going about life. So I had a girl with me for 12 years. She was in 3 houses with me. She had a first house she was in for 4 or 5 years. She was then she moved into a second slow flip for another 4 or 5 years. Then she moved into a third one because she was growing her family. And then she got pregnant again and asked her, you have anything bigger? I didn't. She ended up finding something else and moving out. This girl was late every month for 12 years, meaning she paid the late fee every month for 12 years, right? So I'm telling you that only to let you know she didn't have no money. She bought me 2 houses, paid off free and clear, paid off 2 houses for me and partial on a third. The only difference between her and anyone else, and I always think about this, I'm like, she'll go through the rest of her life thinking, I can't afford it. I wish I can afford to buy a house. I wish. And she did. She bought me 2 houses. The only difference was education. The only difference was education. And it kills me to think that something that little, to spend time doing what you're doing right now, to attend a seminar, to read books, just to educate yourself. The same girl, she clearly afforded it. She paid off 2 full houses for me that I own free and clear, that she made every payment first to last. And I have the benefit of that now forever, but she's still renting somewhere now. And it's crazy when you think about that. And it's just all comes down to education. So, off topic as I always am, Percentage-wise, I couldn't tell you. We file a lot on people, so maybe we file probably 4 times a month, but we very rarely ever actually evict anybody. I file because I'm very big, and I've learned this over the years, on being strict. And I'll tell you why. And the way I word it is we are doing them a disservice if we're lenient, and I'll tell you why. My payments are due the 1st, they go late on the 5th, and we file for eviction on the 12th every single month. We do this on purpose because I used to be, oh, my check's coming late, or I'm starting a new job and I need 2 weeks or whatever. And I would always work with everybody because I don't want to evict anybody. But what would happen is now they're 2 and 3 and 4 months behind. So now it's $4,000 they need to stop it. And guess what? It's cheaper for them to leave. It's cheaper now to just put first and last month down somewhere else and move. And so we're doing them a disservice when we're strict and we like, no, you need to come up with this $935 or whatever it is. They can come up with $935. But when you try and be strict 4 months later and they need to come up with $4 or $5 grand, they can't. You can't get blood from a stone. And so we're very strict with everybody. So we file a lot, but we very rarely ever actually evict anybody.
And if someone calls you and says, I just want out, how do you handle that?
As long as they're current, they're gone. No problem. I don't chase people. I don't threaten people. I'm about as easygoing as a person as you can be because I know, again, I'm like, well, if you leave, I'm going to get $3 grand from somebody within the week. So I'm like, what am I fighting for? So I don't, if somebody wants out, what I tell them generally, as long as you're current, you can leave at any time. I don't mind. As long as they're current, they can leave at any time. If they're late, I still want them to leave on their own because if I have to go through court, then it's going to take me 6-8 weeks to get them out. So if they were late and they were like, oh, well, I really want to move, and I'll be like, okay, well, make sure you leave it clean and do it by Friday. We'll come meet and I'll try and make some guidelines on it, but I'll still let them out. Mm-hmm. Saves me time, which saves me money.
Hey, Scott.
Go ahead. Someone just said something. What's that?
Payment processing. Are you using like a third party, or how are you handling all this? It's a lot of in and out.
Yeah, so I had a slide for that, but I might have screwed something up and didn't transfer everything over properly. So I use a service called Pay Near Me. Has anyone ever heard of Pay Near Me? I absolutely love it more than anything in the world. So what Pay Near Me is it's a service where they can pay cash at any 7-Eleven in the country. They can pay cash at 7-Eleven, at CVS Pharmacy, at Ace Cash Express, and there's like 100 other places, but I always just say 7-Eleven. So when we set somebody up in Pay Near Me, it gives them a barcode on their phone. They walk into 7-Eleven, 7-Eleven scans their phone, they pay them in cash, and then it sends us an email that, 123 Main Street just paid $875. It sends them a receipt, and the money just gets deposited to our bank account the next day. So I absolutely love it because of the people we're dealing with, primarily are cash people. They were going to 7-Eleven anyway to buy their money orders. So now they just pay when they're at 7-Eleven. And so it's a fantastic. There's also one called Cozy, C-O-Z-Y, Cozy. And Cozy allows them to pay by credit card, by debit card, by check. They can pay by check through the app, just putting in their routing numbers. And so we started using that one now as well. But primarily Pay Near Me I've been using forever.
So do you send them an invoice for $875 and then they do that, or how does that work?
Cozy does. Cozy, once you set them up, it automatically sends it every month. What I don't like about it is if they pay elsewhere, we have to input it into Cozy that they paid, otherwise next month it sends them a double invoice. But Pay Near Me, it just gives them a barcode and that's it. There's no invoice. They know, it's just like you all know you have a payment due on the 1st of every month. They know the payment's due every month.
So what's your late fee? $50?
10%.
10%. So if they pay on the 6th, does that barcode change?
No, they can pay any amount they want. It's up to $1,500. So the way Pay Near Me works, which I love, it costs us, the landlords, nothing. It costs them $3.99, which is what they were going to pay anyway between postage, gas, and money order fees. So it costs them $3.99. It costs us as the landlord absolutely nothing. And so it's fantastic. And Cozy's the same way. It costs the landlord nothing. They charge a fee to the person using it.
Sweet.
Yes. I see there's a question up here. Maybe I didn't answer it. What's the longest period of time? Do you have issues with condemnation and permits? So that's a great question. So no, I don't have many issues, but I have had issues where I'll get a letter from the city that says, your gutter's hanging off, you have 10 days to fix it, or we're going to give you a fine, or whatever it may be. And you technically...
let me stop you there because you're technically still the owner of
I
record on
am
this.
correct. Correct.
Right.
So in your area, if you do it the way you're saying, it wouldn't be an issue for you. But for me, we are still technically the owner. And so all I do is I pass the letter on to them. I pass it on to them. And if they don't do it, then I'll get another letter saying, oh, you didn't do this and there's going to be a fine. And I'll let them know, hey, if you don't do it by this date, there's a $350 fine. And we make them pay it. I've done it several times. If they don't fix it, they pay it. I try very hard never to fix anything. And I know that sounds like a slumlord thing to say, but the reason is I've learned if I fix anything, then I opened up the gateway for them to be like, oh, he will fix stuff. And so I try very hard to be like, nope, we are a bank. Treat me. You wouldn't call Bank of America and say you had a leaky sink. Don't call me. That's it. I operate just like a bank. I don't want to ever send anybody to fix anything, or else that's going to open up the gate to, oh, he will fix things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Steve, you look like you're singing.
You talking to your wife again, Steve?
My wife just had a question,
What's your question?
she was commenting on the on occupancy permits of if you buy the house and it's not livable. But I said that shouldn't matter. It's them that's buying the house, not you.
Okay, great question. And that was the first part of that question I didn't answer. So there are some neighborhoods where you have to have a rental inspection or an occupancy permit, right? And I'll get letters sometimes because I'll have an absentee address. So they'll send a blind letter stating that you need to do a rental inspection because you're in this zone or whatever. And I always respond that if that property is not a rental, it's been sold with owner financing. And that's the last I hear of anybody. I do it every time. I'm like, nope, you need a rental inspection. It's not a rental. The judge treats them as a contract owner. You can't treat me as a landlord. So you can't have both ways.
So
Have you
Scott,
had-
Mark says, have you had any homeowners unable to pay due to employment by COVID-19 pandemic?
So I've had some, but not nearly what I was expecting. So in April, I did a meeting, much like we're doing right now for my coaching students. And I was telling them, to prepare, and we need to make sure our private lenders are 100% on time every time because they're the lifeblood of slow flips. So my lenders can never be stressed, ever. So regardless, they always have to be paid. So I had a big meeting with them telling them that I was expecting a large influx of people to not pay. But what happened wasn't that. And the reason is, as well as I do, the government's throwing money at everybody. They're throwing money. They started with their little $1,200, but then their unemployment is ridiculous. They're giving people that were making $400 a week are getting $900 a week in unemployment. I mean, so they're just throwing money at people. So no, we really haven't had. I think I have 2 that are still out there that are behind, but for the most part, it came through quick. I was surprised. I was expecting it to be really bad. Like I was embracing for it, and so far anyway, it's been nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you allow people to pay off early?
Absolutely. So I have in my paperwork, which we didn't go over, that there's no prepayment penalty. However, no prepayments can be made without mutual agreement. And the reason is because I'm not a bank, and this is what I tell them. If you have a mortgage on your house, which you guys probably do, if you send in an extra $100, $200, $500 a month, it has a great impact for you because it goes right off the principal and it'll shave years off of your mortgage. If you send me an extra $100, it's just going to go toward next month's payment. So it's not doing you any favor. If you want to pay $5 or $10 grand, we can do it, and then I'll redo the amortization schedule. Or if you just want to refi it or pay it off, absolutely. I love it. Some people that are new in this, they're like, well, I don't want them to refi because then I'm going to lose my house. I'm like, listen, they're paying you $89. You bought it for $30. Go buy 3 more. What are you complaining about? They're like, yeah, but I don't want to lose my house. I'm like, no. I did this for cash flow. I don't want the money. I want the cash flow. Well, then go buy 3 more. Sometimes I want to strangle people. I'm like, no, you want the. If you buy anything for 30 grand and someone wants to give you 90 grand for it, you sell. We don't have to have that question ever again. If someone wants to give you 90 for something you pay 30 for, you sell. That's it.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I got one real quick. Your investors, you don't have to go into the whole arrangement that you have with them in terms of, you got probably some investors you have multiple loans through. I mean, you just pay them like however many properties they have times the payment on the first of the month, or?
I do a separate check for each one. And I don't know if that's necessary, but I think it's just because I'm not a tech savvy guy. And I know I have 60 payments for each one. And if I started combining them, it would be more complicated for me. Any normal person can figure it out on QuickBooks and write one check per month. But also got to keep in mind, my lenders aren't in the business. These are guys who are just lending money out of their retirement or, their own money. And so they probably appreciate it being separate as well, because they're not these guys are 80, 85, 90 years old, and they have a chart, that they're checking off each check every month. So I do a separate check for each property. I'm sure if I did one big check, it would probably be fine by them, but it's above my pay grade. I'm a very simple person, and so I keep things as simple as possible. I'm sure you can, though. I mean, it's just, again, I'm not a genius.
So Scott, I have not done a slow flip. I'm very, very intrigued by this, and actually, I got turned on to you back in January or so ish, somewhere around there, and then I reached out to you because you run a similar thing in your town like I run in mine, and kind of forged up a friendship, and which is why I should come on here. But I went to my private lenders and I secured this, and I told them what I'm doing. I'm like, look, guys, instead of me going out there chasing properties to keep your money in play and to get you interest, I'm gonna start popping on a couple of these things. And my goal was by summer to have 3 or 4 of these things going. COVID-19 kind of shut me down, and I was homeschooling the kids, so I didn't get a chance to go out and execute on that plan. As things are popping back up, and once my kiddos go back to school, I'm going to rear my ugly head again and start going out there and buying a bunch of stuff. Right now, I'm just a glorified babysitter, mopping up floors and feeding my kids lunch and all that kind of stuff. It's been very nice, but it's time for them to get the fuck back to school. Excuse my language. I rarely cuss, but it's time for them to get the hell back to school. So it was a real easy sell to my private investor because, I'm going to get a fixed rate of return for the next 5 years. That's awesome.
With little to no risk.
Right. A fixed return with little to no risk. And every one of them asked me this question. Well, what happens if you have to evict someone? And I say, I still make you your payment. But
nothing changes on your end.
Yeah, it doesn't affect you at all. And they're like, "Oh, okay, I'm in." I mean, that was the number one question that I got on this, and it was just it. So what? I got to pay you. That's just what it is. I have to pay you because that's the agreement that we have. And they're like, "Okay, I'm in." It's
a mortgage, just like any other mortgage. Yeah,
exactly. And it was really cool because, I say, listen, I'm going to pay you for 5 years, and I'm not going to make hardly any cash flow on this thing for the first 5 years. However, after 5 years, you're going to go on, and I'm going to buy another house with that money, but I'm going to be getting the checks for the next 25 years. Makes sense to them. It was real easy, there no apprehension whatsoever. That the house is going to be in a different name. However, I'm still going to have a first deed of trust with them. So if anyone's thinking like how could I talk a private lender into doing this? Oh, it's super easy to do because they're secured from a first deed of trust. If I die or if I become a jackass and stop paying them, they foreclose and they get the house, it's a beautiful thing to add that private investor in the mix. Is not hard, first of all, and second of all, it's a win-win situation for everybody involved.
Yeah, and the investors love it more than anything. And I'm going to tell you an interesting thing. I've only had one investor turn me down so far, ever, that I've pitched. And I don't pitch a lot because most of them, they refer friends and stuff to me. But one guy that I was talking to about it, the only one, and he was a loaded guy, like 150 million loaded, sold a big company. So it was going to be insignificant to him anyway. The reason he turned me down, and this is what he told his friend who introduced us, is it's too good to be true. Nobody can pay 12%. And I was like, there's no arguing with that. And so,
right.
I was like, all right, let's just let it go. Because you can't argue with that. It's too good to be true. Everybody knows if something's too good to be true, it probably is. And his mindset was nobody can pay 12%. It's too good to be true. There's definitely got to be something wrong here. And he knows now, because this is probably 8 years ago, and he's friends with that guy who's still one of my lenders. And so he knows now that guy's been paid off on all his loans already. He's got new ones out. But at the time, That was the only guy who ever turned me down, and it was such an interesting reason. It's because it's too good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And another thing is, in our market, for people that are doing rehabs, we try to tell them to be sub 250, sub 300, somewhere around there on the ARVs. Any more than that, it becomes too risky. Any less than that is still okay, but there's sophistication in the buyer that's buying a $275,000 house. They're not asking for a bunch of closing costs. They're not doing all that kind of stuff. Agents want to close the deal. There's less hero agents, all that kind of stuff. It's not the first time buyer. They're not worried about inspections and things like that. So that's when we do rehabs, that's the area we want to play in. But in order to get private lenders for that, you might have a private lender that's good for 75,000. You might have a private lender that's good for 150. And then to put them both on the same deal, someone's going to be in first position, someone's going to be in second position. They might not want to do that. It makes it harder to pool funds unless you have an actual hedge fund set up. Like I actually have a fund set up, and it makes it easier to pool funds like that. However, for the guy that you run across on the street that might want to invest in your real estate investing business and wants to do this, but doesn't have $150,000, but he's got 55 in an IRA that he might want to do it, this is perfect for him. You don't have to go out and raise $700,000 in private funds to be able to flip real estate. You can do this with 2 or 3 guys that have $50,000 or $60,000 that have earmarked towards this.
And what they're doing at Christmas and at dinner parties is they're bragging to their friends about how much they're crushing it, making 12% interest. Check comes every month. And guess what their friends are saying? You think you can set me up with him? You think you can introduce me to him? I'd like to make 12%. And then your work is done. That's why I say you got to treat your lenders like gold, because all your new lenders are going to come from the ones that you already have, because their friends are in the same position as they are. And their friends are going to be like, oh, would you mind introducing me? And that's all you want. More and more lenders. We have way more now than we can use.
So coming to my town in St. Louis and starting from scratch, not knowing the market, there's a town here in St. Louis that doesn't allow rentals. And what they tried to do is, or they don't want any new rentals. They don't want anyone. The block can't be more than 30% rental. Okay, so they won't allow any more landlords to come in because they want to improve the value. That is Berkeley, right? And so that would be an unbelievable way to buy, because it's hard for wholesalers to buy properties in Berkeley, because if a wholesaler buys it, well, it's a great rental area, but you can't do any more rentals. So people really shy away from Berkeley, which has unintentionally kept the prices artificially down because investors don't go in there. But that's a perfect place. In fact, while I'm on the call here, I'm gonna look up Berkeley and see what we got going on there. But coming into a new town, not knowing the market, what are some of the things that you would look for? Just like the top bullet points that we should be looking for.
So this perfect question. There's 3 different things. One is, and as you saw with some of my houses, they don't always meet this criteria, but I try and have a house that is somewhat livable. Doesn't have to be showroom, doesn't have to be great. Now I have had them with no kitchens. That one with all the newspapers had no kitchen in it, no toilets, no anything. I have had that one you saw with the fire, but typically I try and find ones that are livable. So somebody could live in it while they work on it. I try and find ones that are livable. Number 2 is I don't buy anywhere that I feel unsafe. Now, everybody's going to have a different perception on what they think is a bad neighborhood or what they think is unsafe. I have what I would consider to be in bad neighborhoods, but on good sections and good blocks. Sometimes it's the same street. On one end, I'm great with it. At the other end, I'm like, just keep going. I had a duplex offered to me recently, and I think it was only for like $6,000. $6,000 for a duplex. But I drove by and it was right next door to a corner store, and there was probably 6, 8 guys hanging out on the porch of the duplex, not to mention another 10, 15 in front. And I'm not even getting out. I just kept going. And I didn't care if it was free. If the house was free, I still wasn't going to buy it, because you only get one life. And so, yes, I want to make money, but not at any cost. And so those are my 2 main things, is to make sure it's somewhat livable and it's nowhere that you are afraid to be or nowhere that you're feeling unsafe. We all have different thresholds of what we consider a bad neighborhood. Sometimes people come with me and they're like, and I'm like, this is a great neighborhood. I know all the neighbors, a great neighborhood, but if you haven't been there, they have a perception that it's bad. But some neighborhoods are bad. And if it is bad and you don't feel safe, then I would stay away from it. That's it. Mm-hmm. And, that's the short of it. And then the third thing, I'm sorry I didn't tell you, is I would check market rents in the area. if all the rents, we have one town that's not far from here where I feel like it's out of the twilight zone. I call on rents and they're like $280, and I'm like, no, for the whole house, and they're like, yeah, 280. I'm like, I'm getting the hell out of here. I don't understand what's happening here. It's called Suffolk, and there's an old peanut farm out there, and it's just weird because the rents are ridiculously low. So I find cheap houses, but I'm afraid to buy them because I don't see any. The rents aren't comparable. I want to be able to sell it for around what the rent would have been. Maybe a little bit more, but it needs to be close to it. And if the rents are nowhere near there, if they can rent for 500 and you want 900, it's going to be a big disparity there. So I don't want that. I want it to be roughly the same amount. And that's really the three things I look for.
So basically, a house that's quasi-livable, sub 30,000, where rents are around $800 to $900.
Yep. And I don't fear for my life. Yeah.
Okay. So there's one, guys, if you guys are listening, might be a really good one to check out. It's been on the market for 86 days for $29,900, 8,000 A-Lane Avenue. It's in Berkeley. Pictures look pretty decent on this house. You could like if this was down at Lake of the Ozarks and it was an old cabin, you'd be dying to live in this house and have a little lake at Lake of the Ozarks. But this is just a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath cottage, and doesn't look too terrible on it. And it's been on the market for 86 days, which means you could probably offer less. 8,000. Actually, you know what? Let me share this. Let me see what you think about this one. You mind?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
And Mark just asked if there's a square footage or bedrooms, and the answer is no. I have some small houses that are only like 700-800 square feet and 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and they still work as long as the comparables are where they need to be. Well, so I don't know your area, but for me to look at that, if that was listed in my area for 29,000, I would be out there in a half an hour, and I'd offer 22 on it, and wherever we landed in between 22 and 29, I'd be happy to pay it. But again, I can't speak for your area if that makes sense in your area. But looking at that house, that's a slam dunk in my opinion.
Yeah, so I'm gonna slowly scroll through the pictures because there's a slight lag in when I do a presentation here, but the hardwood floors look pretty decent. The bathroom looks like it needs some cleanup and some caulk.
I would fill that house in 30 minutes.
Really?
Seriously, okay. 30 minutes.
Look at the kitchen. It's not bad. So, so as far as comps go, like I was when I was looking this up, I didn't hear what you were saying with comps. You don't need to have the comps there, right?
No, you don't need any comps. I still want to buy the house at a deal. I don't want to pay full retail just because I can. So I still want to buy the house at a deal. But most of the neighborhoods where I buy, there are no retail comps. There's comps, obviously, houses still transact, but there's no renovated on the market at full retail. Mm-hmm. So it's very subjective as to what it would be worth because it's not really worth it because if you renovate it, it still doesn't sell. They have no retail market there.
So
and I can't say that for your area.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, so it doesn't matter if 40,000 or 50,000 is the highest priced home that's sold in there. It doesn't matter at all.
Doesn't matter at all. When people say, well, the city assessment's only 52,000, I say, well, the city doesn't buy houses. I said, that's just how much they tax you on. You're actually lucky that it's a low amount because the higher they make that number, the more you have to pay in taxes. And so everything I try and always answer with them, they're lucky. You're lucky it's a low assessment because you're going to pay less in taxes. And, that's the same thing I used to say with Zillow. Now Zillow buys in certain areas, but I used to be like, Zillow says, I said, well, Zillow doesn't buy houses. Zillow says my house is worth $60 billion. Well, yeah. So if I had these houses these are way nicer, which makes me think maybe, again, we're whole different markets, but this is way nicer than what I'm getting for 30 grand in my area.
Yeah. Well,
I'm excited. I'm like the hair on my arms is standing up looking at these houses. I'm like, well, damn, these are beautiful.
Fly on out, man. Sleep on my couch for a week. Let's buy a bunch up.
Yeah, these are nice looking houses.
So
how do you handle insurance and taxes? Are they paying it? Are you paying it?
So it's in my contract. It's in my contract that they have to get their own insurance on it. I've been keeping insurance on them. I do it on cash value for a low amount just to protect my lender. You don't have to because they will notify you if they were to lapse their insurance. And then I also pay the taxes. And the reason I do that is the reason I do anything is I've learned the hard way that when they have to pay the taxes, they don't. So I make them pay me and I pay the taxes. So I do that just to protect it, to make sure everything's getting paid.
You do that through like an escrow account you set up for them, or you just figure that
Yeah.
into the cost of the rent?
I figure it into their payment.
Okay.
So if we're doing that, selling it owner financing, do we do exactly the same thing then? Does that change anything?
Yep. Nope, you would do an amortization schedule for their payment and interest, and then you would break down the taxes for the year divided by 12, the insurance for the year divided by 12, and then add that to their payment.
And then I make the payment for the taxes at the end of the year, or I give it to them for them to pay?
No, you make the payment.
Okay. Okay. All right. We did have one other question here. It looks like Mark says, is there a certain number of square feet or number of bedrooms or anything like that you look at? It's just livable.
Yeah, so I have bought some small ones. I have one that I think is 600 or 700 square feet. When I first looked at it, I was like, oh my God, that's small. But then I look at the neighboring houses that are also the same size and I see what they're getting and I'm like, and it works. I've never had an issue. Obviously I'd like to have 3 bedrooms, but it's not a mandate for me where a lot of other conventional landlords will only buy 3 bedroom or more. And flippers definitely want 3 bedroom or more. So that also enables these prices to come lower when you are willing to buy a 2 bedroom. And I've never had any issue with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, gang, we should all unmute and give Scott a round of applause for taking some time out and being with us today, because this has been very good for us. And Scott, we really appreciate you being here, man. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad. I hope you guys actually end up doing it because.
Yeah.
Thank you. You don't really realize how much you'll appreciate until it's paid off. When a house is paid off, all of a sudden, everything you hated about rentals, you're going to love all of a sudden because it's your money every month. And so, I can say it to you all I want, but you're not going to know it until that day when you make your last payment, so you can really, really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, gang, questions, comments, or concerns? I'm here for you. Let's go out and rock it. We've got some new tools in our toolbox here and kind of a fresh new outlook on stuff. And I can almost guarantee you that virtually hardly anyone in St. Louis. I do know a few people that do a version of this, but they play with their own money. They don't have the private lending in there. Like Scott said, going up, it's finite number, right? And if we were to look for on the MLS for a rehab right now, we would have to look for hours before we found something that was plausible, and we'd be bidding up against like 3 or 4 other people minimum, right? If not more than that. And within just a few minutes found a half a dozen places that might be plausible for this strategy. So we should be going where other people aren't. And I'm very thankful for Scott being on here tonight. Guys, I'm thanking you for your participation and all your great questions and your full attention here. Questions, comments, or concerns, we're here to help. Maybe we can have Scott back in a couple months and kind of check some of the notes that we've done and maybe show off a couple of deals that we've put together.
Fantastic.
Any parting words, Scott?
No, just I hate to say this over and over again, but just go out and do it. I can't stress enough how much you're going to appreciate if you finally do it. 60 months is nothing. I told you I bought a package of 24 houses and I borrowed, I think it was like $500,000. It was one lump sum when I bought it. And I'm already down to 36 months left. And I'm like, man, once that's $10,000 a month I pay on that note. And I'm like, and I have 36 months left till I go up my income by another $10,000 a month. And it's just, one deal at a time. If you just start, if you start today, 6 months from now it's over. If you don't start in 60 months, if you don't start for 60 months, it's going to be 10 years till it's over. So the quicker you get started, the quicker you start making those payments and move the needle. That's all I have for you guys. Have a fantastic evening. Very nice to see you. For the few of you I do get to see, and everybody else, I just see your initials.
Thank you.
We're kind of a shy group, I guess. Thanks again, man. Thanks everybody. Questions, comments, or concerns? We're here to help. Let us know. I forgot. Oh, let me just say this because I totally forgot. We have a new member just joined us this week for the first time. This is his first interaction with what we're doing, Randy Johnson. So everyone say yay, Randy, for jumping on board with us and teaming up with us. We look forward to a bright future with you for sure. Yeah, guys, we're gonna cut it off. We'll see you at the top or from the top. Talk to you soon.
Have a great night.
Hey, thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Hey.
Good night. Thank you.